Good day, brothers and sisters. This is the other Paul, and you are here for an excellent, very special interview. Really, one of the first of its kind on my channel. God willing, more to come with other scholars in particular. But we have today a real Egyptologist, a real Christian Egyptologist with us. Dr. Falk, hello. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Excellent. I am doing better than otherwise in the past few months, given our lockdown situation in Australia. And it's just alleviating now. So fantastic. It's all happening. It's all everything just feels much better in my life. I don't know if you can say the same about you in Canada, but
well, we still got some onerous restrictions, but hopefully someday people's fears will assuage and life will return to some semblance of normal.
God willing, 100%. We could definitely talk a lot about that. In fact, I've talked a lot about it, at least on other people's channels, but that's not why we're here today. Today is going to be a positive educational video in particular. So not quite a class, obviously more of an interview, but I'm going to give you some very, very solid content on how to do history, how to interpret evidence, particularly centered around Egypt, ancient Near East, the Bible, but principles which can be applied into more or less all other areas of history with a little bit of modification, if you will. But anyway, I think we'll start with some context. Would you be able to give us a brief introduction of yourself, your work, and all that, Dr.
Sure.
Epic.
Sure. I'm a Canadian. I've got 4 graduate degrees. I did my PhD at the University of Liverpool in Egyptology. Recently, I wrote a book called The Ark of the Covenant in its Egyptian Context, an Illustrated Journey. And I have this small YouTube channel called Ancient Egypt and the Bible.
Small? You say small, but definitely not as small as mine. One day, no, don't worry. One day I'll get to your level. Just one day. I don't know. Maybe we'll have a race at some point. We'll have to see about that. But I reckon we just jump straight into it. No more of the fact.
Sure.
Not even 3 minutes in, we're already jumping right into the content. So to go with the first thing to kind of set everything up for why this is really necessary to do this. And mainly for people, this can be applied for all history, all historiography, historical study, and all that, what we're going to be covering today. But in particular, of course, my channel and other people who may be watching will obviously be very much inclined to studying history around the Holy Scriptures, for example. So for these people, I'll ask you, Dr. Falk, how greatly does a knowledge or lack thereof of the ancient Near East and perhaps in your case, Egypt, impact biblical interpretation? Maybe with an example or two.
A lot. We really do need a when we talk about how to read the Bible, we have to, and this is actually true of any text. This is not just true of the Bible. Any text, you have the text, its immediate context within the greater text, and then the context within the culture. We have 1 and 2 with the Bible. We're missing number 3.
Right.
Things that we would normally take for granted in a conversation. Like, let me, for example, just say, okay, I'm going to pass you the ball. Okay.
Wait, where's what bar? How are you going to do that? Wherever
the ball. Yeah, exactly. But let's say I just say, I'm going to pass you the ball.
Yeah.
Okay. You understand what I mean by that because we share a common context, common cultural context. We play sports. We do a lot of games. Not every culture has that context.
Yes.
In the ancient Near East, if you said, I'm going to pass you the ball, that would mean absolutely nothing.
or maybe just straight up literally, okay, what ball?
Yeah, what's a ball? That's what they're going to tell you is they're going to say what's a ball?
Interesting.
Because they didn't play those kind of games in the ancient Near East.
True.
Okay? Now they played other kinds of games, but not those. So just by telling you that I'm going to pass you the ball, I'm giving you something that we share in our context.
Yeah.
Now that cultural context is what we are missing when we come to the Bible. And this has led to a lot of mistakes in, say, translation or misunderstandings, or even knowing this helps us to refine our understanding of the Bible. One of the classic, for example, the classic mistakes that we find in, say, like the King James Version where it talks about cities on their strength. Well, the word for strength in the Hebrew is tel. A tel is essentially an artificial mound that was built up over time by cities being destroyed, filled in with sand, new cities being built up, and so on. So it's essentially cities on their hills. In 1611, when the King James Bible was translated, they didn't know what a tel was because the translators had never been to Israel.
Okay.
So by knowing that archaeological context, we can have a better translation for that passage.
Got you. Okay, that makes plenty of good sense. And I have to personally say, someone who's I've done formal study in this, so amen. I believe the classic dictum that you bring up, or I guess not 100% on this. Oh no, I'd say it is, but the classic dictum I see you like to bring up on your streams is the text without context is a pretext for a proof text.
Yeah.
Roman Catholics. Anyway, I'm sorry. No, that's the thing with my
cheap shot.
people who watch my channel will understand. I have a bit of a dialogue and apologetics back and forth with Roman Catholics and a little more now with Eastern Orthodox. But in case anyone has the wrong idea, a lot of my best friends are very traditionalist Catholics, so I don't hate Catholics. Don't worry. But I will 100% give you the cheap shots if I get the chance.
Get the chance.
As I would expect from you guys back at me.
Got to do what you're best at.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And with what you're mentioning here, with so much of that context being missing, that's so true. And I think part of that, one of the things that brings to mind, a media story that brings to mind, I think my own mum. So my mum's actually a biblical scholar herself. She attends certain conferences and all that. I don't think she goes to SBL, but she actually wrote a paper on the event of when the Lord was standing before the tent or something, and then Zipporah realized that Moses hadn't circumcised his son or grandson. I think it was his
son.
Yeah, and then she quickly did it herself, and then she says she throws the stuff at Moses' feet and says, "Now you are a husband or a man of blood." And apparently that's just like no one has any idea on what the heck that means. There's theories here, theories there, but it seems like something significant what she's saying, but we just have absolutely no idea. I don't know if you've looked at that story yourself. Do you have any theories?
Well, I have some ideas. I'm still sort of piecing that together myself, to be honest. I know a little bit about circumcision, though, within its cultural context. The Egyptians practiced circumcision.
True, yeah.
Now, it's kind of amazing that, Moses wouldn't practice it himself, even though he probably was circumcised, being from an Egyptian culture. So we actually have a relief from Dynasty 5 Mastaba that actually shows Egyptians practicing circumcision.
Okay, interesting.
So it is something that we find in Egyptian culture.
Okay. Was it practice on a cultic nature like in Israel, or not quite? Or
we don't know the exact reason why it was done in Egypt. We just know that it was.
Fair enough. Okay, no, that's totally fair. It's yeah, I mean,
and it was practiced on adults, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting. I don't suppose that was for conversion or anything, because hey, come join the true religion of
Egypt. No,
it wasn't. I wasn't. And actually, that reminds me. That's another really big bit of context that, with a couple of little exceptions, I guess, but like back then even in times just prior to the scriptures and contemporaneous, so with the Roman culture and all that, there wasn't really this concept of heresy and orthodoxy, at least not to anywhere near this extent that the Christian faith would have. Like there would be the the Artanist heresy, so to speak. But not really because this is an incorrect belief, but because it's just stepping on the toes of all the other gods. So that was another really big bit of context that really changes how the view of the Bible is, because it's not quite because it's always assumed all throughout that is Israel. It was always the one God. There was always a concern with heresy, but I mean, not really, not quite. At least until the law, there would be some kind of
once you had the deliverance of the law, everything changed.
Everything changed. That's it.
And then after the giving of the law, you have now this struggle. You have the struggle between Yahweh worship and the gods of Canaan.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll say now, I guess, to kind of push further into this. Normally, questions like, "Oh, what resources do you recommend?" Normally, that stuff kind of happens at the very end of an interview. But I wanted to structure this so that our discussion, it's kind of like we're kind of having a bird's eye view over the chronological process of people going through the historical process, getting into the field and all that. So I think the first direct question on this I'll ask about is for people wanting to get into, let's be specific. Let's say Egyptology, right? What kinds of resources? Maybe if you have specifics, that'd be cool if you can name them. But otherwise, just generally, what kinds of resources should students go for if they want to get started on Egyptology and go towards a level of competence?
Well, Egyptology is one of those fields that's really, really difficult to get competent at. It's actually easier to go, say, the other way, which is from Egyptology to biblical studies, than it is to go from biblical studies to Egyptology.
Right.
And the reason why is because in Egyptology, you're dealing primarily with primary sources. You have to know your primary sources. And a primary source will trump a secondary source every time.
Amen. Whereas
in more biblical studies, you're dealing with secondary sources because your literary corpus is relatively small. So to become more competent in, say, biblical studies, the level that you have to sort of achieve is sort of shorter. Yes, if you want to be considered a world-class biblical scholar, you've got to know all the secondary sources. But that's not true in Egyptology. What you have to have is a good grasp on where to find, how to read the primary texts. That involves 4 years of language study.
True. Okay.
On top of maybe biblical languages.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. How would you say, at least given the state right now, how for a student just wanting to get into it, let's say university age student, maybe a high school student if they're really, really into it, but like let's say a regular university age student, and they want to get started on that. How difficult do you reckon it would be, even just to find, like, let's say, even just searching for the English translations of primary source for Egyptology? How much difficulty could they expect with that?
Well, there's a lot of translations on, say, the common texts that are available now in English. So that's not going to be so onerous. The difficulty comes in when you have to deal with more obscure stuff. We have to recognize that most of the sources from ancient Egypt have not been translated into English.
Sure.
Okay? There's thousands of funerary stela that have never been translated. There's been thousands of papyri that have never been translated. Okay. If you want to get competent in the field, it is going to boil down to learning the languages. And that's almost unavoidable. That's actually unavoidable in any say field where you want, say, doctoral level competency. Now, say at a master's level or a more lay level, yeah, you can get away with translations. That's fine. Okay, that's okay. But then again, at that point, you can't sort of press the bare boundaries either. You can't say this is an authoritative translation because you don't know.
That's it. I sympathize. Oh, far out. I'm so happy to hear that from you. I sympathize with that so much when people a lot of people, including ironically laymen. That's where it becomes really ironic when they talk about this authoritative scholar, authoritative translation, scholarly consensus, and all that yada yada yada. And of course, like it's one thing to hear from another scholar. You can still say it's fallacious, but then to hear it from another layman, it's kind of like, well, hang on, you're a layman. How do you know that what's authoritative is in fact authoritative? It's really beautiful because then once you yourself like gain some level of competence with, and of course my main field would be the biblical study stuff. So like Koine, Greek, classical Hebrew. I haven't practiced that in a while. And then of course church fathers and all that jazz. Once you're familiar with those languages, you've done good study with history and the texts themselves and all that, then you can just say to these kinds of people, well, hang on, I've studied this stuff myself. How about you actually address what I'm saying and not just, oh, well, the scholar says otherwise. So,
well, I mean, even take for example Greek. 1 year of learning Greek is just enough Greek to be dangerous.
Yeah. I put my hand up because unfortunately my degree only gave me time to do 1 year equivalent of Greek, but then since then I've done
1 year of Greek is enough to be dangerous.
To be dangerous, yes.
Dangerous.
In that sense, you mean like you know just enough, but you can make some big mistakes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I've encountered that. I've done it myself, and I've encountered it a lot.
Really, you really don't understand Greek until you've done the 3 years. 3 years of Greek will reveal to you some really, really nasty surprises you never learned in first year.
Yep.
The genitive and the participle.
Oh, those things.
I mean, the genitive in Greek looks so easy as a first year, Greek learner. Oh, the forms are easy, no?
Yeah.
No.
I mean, the form, there's only so many number. I mean, of course, you got your whatchamacallit, you got like the actual number of the actual number of forms in which you can take. I mean, but you can smash those down easy. Yeah. And then you read, let's say, Daniel Wallace's Typical Greek, and you say, oh, here's the uses of the genitive.
50 of them. There's 50 of them.
That's it.
And one's right. Only one is right.
That's it. So that's why you have massive debates. Like, for example, what does Paul mean by pistis Christou? Does he mean the faithfulness of Christ or faith in Christ?
Or having faith? Or
that's it.
Or so where the faith is? Or
that's it. And of course, this isn't to dissuade people from getting into the fields because, like, obviously, we can have these debates do happen. You can come to conclusions, even if you have to base it on like a more probable level. But obviously, to kind of circle it back to what we're doing, point being, knowing the language is absolutely critical, especially if you're gonna start arguing from passages which have some very key translational debates. One off the top of my head would be: does monogenes, does that refer to only begotten or uniquely begotten or unique son and all that? Which obviously has some pretty major, not catastrophic, but major theological differences, and there's debate over that. So if you want to actually have that competence, as you would say,
well, there's even a contextual debate over what does firstborn mean in the Old Testament.
Yeah, that's it. There you go.
And this is one of the things I have to struggle with all the time is people don't understand what firstborn means. And say the Exodus narratives, like in the 10th plague, the plague of the firstborn, people don't get it. It's not ordinal birth. It has nothing to do with ordinal birth. And I see scholars make this mistake. It means exactly the same in the 10th plague as it does for the birth of Isaac.
Okay.
Which is, Isaac's not the firstborn in ordinal birth. He's second. Ishmael's first. But Isaac is the heir designate.
Okay. Interesting.
So when the 10th plague happens in Egypt, what happened was it was the death of all the heir designates. Okay, you could be the 13th son and still end up being the heir designate because all your brothers died off before you.
Yes, I remember seeing you explain this. Was this in one of your more recent streams, or I guess you might have explained it quite a few times?
I think I've explained it a couple times on various streams and interviews. Yeah,
and I guess that can change quite a bit because you might see, for example, like you're thinking of the Prince of Egypt movie. Honestly, personally, that's my favorite Exodus movie. I don't know what qualms you might have with it, but just with how it's, notwithstanding the history, although. To be fair,
that minor detail.
The one thing that they do better than they might do better than others is that, knowingly or not, they show where the Israelites were, and it's right near the palace and all that, and giving your identification of Ramses, and that's basically right next to Avaris, the Semitic city. That's I guess that's one detail that works. But then they show with the deaths of the firstborn to get back to this. Now it's all very young kids, and maybe some were, but it's not quite. Some of them would probably be.
This is not about infanticide.
Not necessarily.
No, But because it hits adults too. Adults were firstborns. You could be the firstborn as an adult. You could be the firstborn as an old man.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I mean, Merneptah, the guy that ultimately succeeded Ramses II, he was 13th in line for the throne. Yeah. He's a firstborn and heir designate at age 65.
Yeah, what an old bloke. And my buddy Jeff also points out. My buddy Jeff, a Goy for Jesus, that's his channel. He points out another very accurate detail of the whale in the Red Sea as it's being parted. 100% accurate.
No.
100%. 10 out of 10, bro. That was another brilliant detail. Like, wow, marine biologists must absolutely love that detail when they saw it in the movie.
No,
it was brilliant. I don't know. Okay, let's drop the act. What the heck was that? But
the Red Sea was probably no more than 40 feet deep.
Bruh.
No more than 40 feet deep.
Oh dear.
And it's located in the Plusiac estuary.
Okay, but surely if you like airlifted a whale in there, it could fit.
Oh, I'm sure it could, but it probably wouldn't do very well since it's all brackish water.
Maybe that's why it's there, because when the sea's being parted in the Prince of Egypt, it's like really big, a lot of space. So the whales decide to go, hey, let's go join those guys.
I mean, the whales would have to swim past the shoals. I mean, that's going to be a tough job for the whale.
David, you're such a killjoy. Oh, well.
Yeah, you can't take me anywhere.
Oh, well. But, okay. So we've recognized that. All the issues of context, or cultural context, even mere figures of speech, even after you translate something, because you can still miss that. Knowing language itself, getting into the weeds of the study of language.
PhD study is a language game.
Yeah, that's it. So let's say whether they're not quite at that stage yet, and the students, I guess they just have the text with them. They're going to go into it, whether they're in the language stage or whether they're not. They've got the text in front of them. They want to start studying. Just before they begin, how should students approach those ancient texts before they begin reading and analyzing them, like basic principles, basically?
Before any student picks up a text, whether it is an Egyptian text, whether it is a biblical text, every student needs to approach the text with the idea that my first interpretation of the text may not be the right one.
Okay.
We have to recognize that when we are looking at a text, we're looking at it through Western eyes.
Yes, true that.
So we have to be able to understand that what we are dealing with here is not a Western text. These are Eastern texts. They're ancient Near Eastern texts. They're ancient texts. And just because we read something in those texts doesn't mean we're interpreting it correctly.
That's very true. Yeah, very true. I can't tell you the countless times I'll read a text first time. Seems pretty obvious. Mm-hmm. And then you I don't know, you read like about a little bit of a word study, or you read the same set of words in another text. And oh boy, now that changes everything. Probably my favorite. Darn it, it's all the way back in my library. Okay, favorite example of that would be the whole thing with the Tower of Babel, and you can probably tell where I'm going to go with that. And I read some of what's it called again? Ancient Near Eastern Thought and the Old Testament. John Walton, really, really good.
Yeah, really good book.
Basically trying to put people into the mindset of ancient Near Easterners.
I like Walton's stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah, me too. Maybe I'll bring it out a little bit later, but I'll bring that up a little bit later. So he gives a good big illustrative example that he brings up is with the Tower of Babel, how it's commonly very easily assumed, look, they're trying to build like a bloody massive tower all the way up into the clouds.
No.
And so they can reach the gods and somehow they'll be more powerful. And like, oh dear, oh no. But then hang on a second, we have these same idioms of reaching the clouds and all that, but it's not talking about actually building a structure that's 12 kilometers tall. It's actually in reference to the ziggurat, which was next to the temple and through which would be the bridge from the heavens down to the earth. So that
it's not reaching into heaven, it's reaching up to heaven.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. It's
different.
I think the words Walton used, it's not it's not trying to bring us up to heaven. It's trying to bring heaven down to us.
Yes.
It's the whole bridge, the ziggurat system. That's where the gods would come through, inhabit the idols, and they take them over the temple, do their all that jazz, and then they take them back up, transport, Stargate back to heaven, that kind of jazz. And so the whole thing with the Tower of Babel is that they're not trying to make a stupidly tall structure. It's just that they're trying to use the gods, like just at all. They're trying to make personal use of the gods.
It's man-styled religion.
That's it, yeah, and that's why it makes better sense because there's always a little bit of a difficulty with the normal reading. Like, why would the gods say if they can reach the clouds, nothing will be impossible for them? Like, I mean, okay, that means they're powerful, but surely the gods could just.
That's not what's trying. That's not what they're trying to say.
But then once you understand that, actually, no, it's the bridge through which they'll be able to pull the gods down. Oh, that makes a lot more sense.
Pull the gods down, or even worse, create a mentality of man-styled thought and religion. Essentially a kind of humanism.
Interesting. Okay.
It's a kind of humanism.
Ancient Near Eastern humanism. I kind of hate that thought from the very conception of it, but oh dear.
But that's sort of where it would lead.
Yeah.
You've got man-styled religion. You're going to end up with man-styled thought and philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So then
by the Roman times, you got nukes.
and so that's why once you get basic principles or basic contextual ideas like that, so the whole thing of pulling the gods down through the ziggurat, that the gods were considered basically powerful men in a way, really, at least with how they portrayed them. And then other things like we mentioned before, that there wasn't really a concept of heresy and orthodoxy. Like religion wasn't. It was practical. It was literally just a case of, hey, look, we give this stuff to these gods, they'll give us good crops. So it's not really because, maybe with the rare exception, but it's not really because you have a personal devotion and relationship with the deity, but it's simply because they're just these really powerful beings that can give you some really good stuff if you appease them. So it's not really religion in the modern sense of the idea. So you get those ideas in you among a billion others, regarding a billion other subtopics in this ancient historical area.
Yeah.
And once you have that in, at least maybe, well, I guess you kind of have to read the sources to kind of come to those ideas. So you kind of have to go through the trial and error of reading and then getting some scholarly stuff. They'll say, actually, if you look here and here and here.
And reading them in their context.
Yes, that's it. So once you have that mentality, like before you really start seriously getting into the weeds of it, once you have those ideas of the context in your head, even if it wasn't perfectly communicated by other scholars, you'll be able to pick it out eventually at some point.
Yeah.
Then you'll be able to get into the text and be able to say, okay, what is this saying? And then eventually you have those awkward conversations where you're talking with someone about this text and it's like, oh yeah, obviously it says this. And they're just like, bro, what are you smoking? I don't know. You can say that. You can say that about a few. You can say that about a few. Oh, someone will probably say that if you're all into the whole divine counsel thing from Heiser and that, and then just your normal evangelicals who don't have those ideas and like, bro, what do you want about?
or they hate you.
That's it. Like,
because they don't understand.
There are other gods than Yahweh. How dare you say that? Actually, Elohim wasn't just for deities, but that's anyway. But so we have those ideas. So we have the I guess the pre-reading context, or again, they may take some trial and error with the primary sources themselves to kind of get into that context, on top of the very helpful secondary work.
Well, I mean, if you just start with the idea that what I'm reading might not be how I understand it.
That's it. Yeah.
Then at least you have the mental flexibility to assess other things and evaluate what your interpretation is.
Yeah, that's it. So having that humility and studying in order to account for anything you might have missed and all that, that's some very good first principles, you would say, for getting.
Because if we don't bend on our interpretation, we tend to break.
Yeah.
And that's when people get discouraged and discard the texts. Is, it didn't fit my interpretation, therefore the Bible must be junk.
But yeah, 100%, I agree.
It isn't logical, but it is very human.
Yeah, that's it. And of course, to I guess to kind of tick off another group, I'll see that a lot with the very hardcore Bultmann type form critics, and even those up into our days. Oh, this text clearly doesn't betray, or I don't know, it does betray a hesitancy of the perusia, so it must be some late text, and I'm just like, or maybe your ideas are just wrong. I don't know, bro. That's you ever considered that?
Documenting hypothesis.
It's actually a really fantastic article. That's well, it's kind of a mockery of what's the guy's name? Was it David Klein or something? Where he does the documentary hypothesis, but on Winnie the Pooh. Oh no, I kid you not. You know, I'm gonna get the link at some point, but it is actually a work of you will love it.
I'd love to read that.
It is a work of art. Like he goes very full on with sounding like the documentary hypothesian scholar and all. It's absolutely brilliant. I'll probably send it to you. I don't know, maybe we'll show it at the end. But I guess a lot of overlap with that prior question on like before you get into the text. So yeah. I guess, I don't know, some of your questions, some of your answers might be some of the same, but as the student is reading the text, as they're using it in their own historical investigations, what do they need to consider in the middle of the process now that they're stuck into it? Okay, in the middle of the process, again, it's more or less skills acquisition. Okay, so you've got your mindset coming in, then you got your skills acquisition. This is where you start learning about critical commentaries. You start learning about commentaries that are based on languages, and your language acquisition. You cannot ignore your language acquisition through all of this. That's the middle process. Yes, very true.
And then at the end of the process, when you're doing, say, your doctoral work, you're now using those skills and applying those skills to doing serious research.
Yep. Okay. So pretty straightforward, more or less.
It's pretty straightforward, yeah.
Yeah, more or less the same stuff we're talking about, but just actively keeping that in your mind and doing that. Or I guess not trying to overstress yourself, but just if it's really ingrained, all these ideas of the context and the language and all that, it should eventually at some point become like a second nature. You'll read a text to say something.
Now, not to downplay this, but that skills acquisition is a big thing. That's about 90% of the work you'll do.
Yeah,
just to get there. Because it takes a long time and a lot of work to get those skills. Some fields more than others.
Yeah.
You're like, for example, Egyptology is an incredibly arduous. I tell my students who come into my, say, history of ancient Egypt class that there's more to the history of ancient Egypt than aliens and pyramids. And I have to say that because they're so influenced by the History Channel. And I tell them this is going to be like drinking out of a fire hose. It's going to be like drinking out of, you've got 3,000 years of history here to sort of get your head around by the time you take the final exam.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just telling them that, and a lot of them sort of blow it off until they actually hit that first midterm and find out that they got a big red F at the top of their exam. I tell people that, this is that Egyptology, as far as a historical discipline goes, is, say, the elite rank of history. It's the elite among historians.
Totally unbiased coming from an Egyptologist, but go on.
I know. I mean, I think every person in every field says that. But you have to accumulate so many different skills to become an Egyptologist. The number of seats to become, say, do PhD work is very small. The field is highly competitive. Much more so than, say, early modern history. Much more competitive.
Yeah, that makes sense. That does, I guess. Why might that be the case? I guess with that massive competition, is it? I don't know. Explain that to me.
Okay. Part of the massive competition is demand is high. Okay, if I have a history of Egypt class, I will fill it out every time. 50 people easily. Okay. So demand is high. The skills you need to acquire to get there are difficult to learn. You got a lot of people jockeying for the very few seats there are in doctoral programs. And then once you're finished your PhD program, it still remains competitive to get a academic position.
Interesting. Okay, so a little bit of a tangent, but very interesting, especially if someone watching right now is considering getting into the Egyptology. I guess a nice forewarning.
It's a lot more competitive to do Egyptology than say Hebrew studies. The Old Testament studies, there's a lot of programs out there. A lot of people are offering, a lot of schools are offering PhDs in biblical studies.
Yeah.
And in Old Testament.
That's it. Yeah. So that's good. So if you're considering becoming an Egyptologist, very lucky to be here. Watch this again if you have to. But I guess we'll try to do a little bit of application of these principles of reading things in context, as with what we're just discussing already. So I guess one example of something that you read a certain passage in the scriptures, right? So the Christian scriptures, and it's not just about the Bible. Like, it's not like, we do this process with the Bible, it's one way. We do it with another document, it's totally different. Or I guess it's more or less the same stuff. Like, you read stuff in their context. Like, it's kind of common sense with the language and all that. So one example we can bring up, I guess, is with the 10 Commandments, and of course, highly relevant with you because you got your whole 10 Commandments series. Which, if you're not subscribed already to Dr. Falk's channel, do it. It's fantastic. He's got, among the billions of other videos he's got already, he's got a series on the 10 Commandments. I believe they're on 2 commandments at a time. Sorry?
Billions? Really?
Well, this is part of the contextual hyperbolic nature.
Oh, sure, I get
it. So billions doesn't actually mean billions, just like 40 doesn't actually mean 40. Anyway.
Yes.
Yes. So you take that as a literary convention or just exaggeration, but either way. So one example, I guess, of how we will read a text one way, before context, and then after context, something totally different. I don't exactly remember how you talked about it in your 10 Commandments video, but the second commandment, which I got here with the New English translation, if anyone wants to check it up, which says, "You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water below. You shall not bow down to them. You shall not serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, responding to the transgression of the fathers by dealing with children to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who reject me, and showing faithfulness," and so on and so forth. So from the outset, we'll see, in particular with fellow Protestants like mine, they'll simply mean it's just as simple as, okay, no images of God, no, and many of them, the very hardcore Protestants, will say no depictions of God, straight up. So not even just images which you bow down and worship, which I would argue with Roman Catholicism and Orthodoxy, for example, they do have a second commandment violation, I would argue. But many, especially the Protestants and even historic iconoclasts would, and for those who don't know, iconoclasts, people who just reject all images in the Christian religion, and they'll smash them, like, quite literally. But they'll simply say this bans images entirely of often of God. Some people say no images at all. So what would the context say? How would the context get us to read this passage?
Well, the context of, say, that passage would be that coming out of Egypt, they're making idols of practically everything. They're making idols of gods from heaven. They're making idols of gods from the under earth. They are your classical syncretistic polytheists. So, they would have no problem setting up an image of Yahweh and then putting beside him Osiris, Amun-Re, Khnum, Montu, Isis, Mut, etc. Oh, and let's throw in Baal and Resheph and Astarte too.
Sure.
Okay? Fire insurance. But the commandment says, do not place, in my face, literally says, in my face, an idol. That's what it says. So when you worship Yahweh, you are being exclusive here. There's an claim to exclusivity. When you worship Yahweh in his sanctuary, do not set up these other idols in his presence.
Yeah.
They're abominable.
Even if someone's not intending on, at least at that time, of like going to a full bow down and worship and incense, even if they're not intending on that, it's just no, you don't set up these other idols at all of other Elohim, so to speak.
Yeah,
this is just not at all.
Not at all. Now, that's the immediate context is having your little your little shrine, and every house in Egypt had a shrine.
Mhm.
You had a shrine before you went into the main doorway, where you would give your a little offering to the household gods.
Yeah.
Whether those are essentially named deities or ancestral deities, didn't matter. But you'd have a little collection of idols near your doorway.
Okay.
So the context here is telling the Israelites, hey, when you set up in the land, God's going to be everywhere. God's going to be, even though at that particular time, the Israelites believed that Yahweh was a localist deity, meaning he could be only one place at one time. Because everyone in the late Bronze Age believed this.
Mhm.
Everyone in the late Bronze Age believed that gods were in one place at one time. This is why the whole Sinai thing and the Ark of the Covenant thing is so important. Is it's leveraging on that idea that God could be in one place at one time to start changing the views of the ancient Israelites. So then when they do finally get into the land and they do set up their homes and they do set up a tabernacle and ultimately a temple, they then know that, okay, God is not just in the temple or in the tabernacle.
Got ya.
So then where then is putting idols in God's face? Everywhere.
So on top of establishing exclusivity, no, me and me alone, it goes even beyond that to say not only is it just worshiping me, but I'm everywhere.
Yeah.
So I guess kind of a negative command, but also a positive statement is kind of what you're saying, that God is saying that he is everywhere.
Each one of these commandments is a catch bucket for wider behaviors. So while the command is very restrictive in one way, the implications are very wide.
Yeah. So it's not something that, it's not like it says it directly in the text, but it's just, what is it saying by what it's not, well, by what it is saying, and then of course implications, as you just said.
Yeah, the implications, yeah,
because then that, I guess, just thinking with that ancient mindset of the whole, our gods are, I guess, at some point in heaven, but then when we want them, we just zap them into this little figurine or something, among other things, and then we get them to do.
Well, those idols were proxy bodies.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
they're proxy bodies.
And then so once once God says, yeah, no, you're not doing that, then they're like, oh, so where is God then? I guess he's talking to us. Well, I guess at that exact moment, we're giving the commandments, he's up on the mountain. But what about after that? If we're not to communicate with him through these idols, where must he be? Or maybe where isn't he? I guess that's one way to do it. Okay.
Where isn't he?
So that's very, so that should already just flip the paradigm, I guess, quite a bit.
It does.
It's not a case of strictly speaking, no depictions of Yahweh, even in non-religious contexts. Or like it would, I guess, in some ways say, don't make an idol of him, of course.
Yeah.
But there's a whole metaphysic behind it. It's not merely God doesn't want to be depicted in an image. He doesn't, obviously. Yeah. But there's a much deeper reasoning behind that, which once you get into that reasoning, because their religious use of images was basically a way of manipulating the gods. But then once you consider that, mere artistic depiction of, for example, Christ isn't exactly haram, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, take the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, the Ark of the Covenant is a piece of religious furniture very, very similar to, say, the sacred barks and the palanquin thrones we find in Egypt. Very similar. But there isn't an idol in it. And this is very, very interesting. Because in ancient Egypt, idols had to be cared for by human hands. They had to be fed, clothed, put to bed, woken up in the morning, reclothed, refed, moved by human hands into their sacred barks to rule, and then tucked in bed at night. The care of idols requires human hands. So now you get the presence of God coming down from Mount Sinai and then coming to rest between the wings of the cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant.
Very
You
interesting.
now have the presence of God with no idol. An idol that a presence of God that cannot be cared for by human hands, never sleeps, never leaves the throne.
Yeah.
The
And
theological implications of this are massive.
Yeah, far out. And then you have the converse, like in I want to say First Samuel, one of the Samuels, I think, where they would they bring the Ark of the Covenant into battle, and that guarantees them victory. But then they make some personal oopsies, and then they bring the Ark as if it's just going to guarantee them victory, and then God's like, "Oh, sorry guys, I'm not there right now." Which with us, I guess, gets more display of the idea that God isn't he's not going to be manipulated by
he's not going to be manipulated. Well, when they got the Ark of the Covenant to bring it to battle, they went to Shiloh. A mob went to Shiloh. They grabbed the Ark without its coverings. Okay. When the Ark went on parade, it had to go with his coverings.
Very interesting.
So you take it out of the shrine at Shiloh without the requisite treatment and preparation, that's going to end up in a disaster because you're not doing it God's way.
And he doesn't have to go with the rest of the box if you don't if you don't treat it well.
You don't treat it well, he doesn't have to give you victory.
Yeah, that's right. And then eventually, straight up the entire thing, including the covering, he's not restricted to that either. One day.
Yeah.
Far out. Mind-blowing stuff. And I guess we can try to apply so broad summary of that. I guess what I just said before we talked about the Ark of the Covenant. Religious imagery, at least for use in terms of worship, no, but not because God just hates all images, because there's specific ideas behind it, you can manipulate them, and Yahweh is saying, yeah, no, you can't manipulate me, sorry, mate.
God doesn't hate all images.
Yeah.
There's cherubim on the Ark.
We have
there's cherubim on the tents.
Yeah, and we have the the seal of King Hezekiah. Yeah. And when we look at that, it depicts Yahweh as like a sun disk with the wings.
Solar disk with wings, yeah.
That's it, yeah, taking from the I guess taking from Egypt a bit, but I think that was also
it is definitely Egyptian symbolism because there's ankhs on there too.
Yes, that's it. Yes, the ankhs. I remember that. But basically, and I remember saying, you'll see the typical wannabe form critics there saying, "Oh, see, the religion of Israel kind of evolved and all that jazz." When it's just like, I mean, heaven forbid they just rip off imagery from other religions and use.
Oh yeah, they did. They did frequently rip off imagery from other religions.
Like the mere idea of calling Yahweh the King of Kings, taking from the King of Persia, taking from Cyrus the Great, among others. So that's obviously very common.
The Bronze Age cherubim are a ripoff of Egyptian winged goddesses.
There you go.
The seraphim are essentially borrowed from Uraeus or watchet cobras.
Interesting. Although I guess maybe in a theological
flying snakes.
Yeah.
They're flying snakes. Flying snakes that spit out fire. That's where we get the word seraphim from, the burning ones.
Very interesting. And then, of course, in a theological perspective, one would say the Egyptian depictions and all that, more or less just a corrupted view of what was actually the case. So case in point, the cherubim and seraphim, that's the reality Yahweh wants to reveal. And he'll borrow the images from the other guys and make it known that way, because makes sense.
These are the symbols that and the common contextual language that was ubiquitous across the culture. It'd be the same as if we today talk about Star Wars.
Yeah.
You know, we can talk about Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, and you can talk about that in just about any culture living today, because just about every living culture today has seen Star Wars.
True that.
It's part of our common culture. There's a Jedi cult in Great Britain right now.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I remember that.
There are Star Wars fans in Japan and China.
Fire out. Yeah.
There's Star Wars reenactors in Central and South America.
Yeah. That's it.
It's ubiquitous across our culture.
100%.
Back then, images of cherubim, seraphim, sacred boxes, idols. These were the languages. These are the symbols that are ubiquitous across the culture. Ideas such as magic and demons, these are ubiquitous across the culture.
Okay. I want to leave most questions to the very end, but there's one question which is quite relevant to this, I guess, because I think some people may be having the same idea. So my man Jeff asks, how much of the borrowing is a legitimate borrowing of imagery, and how much is other pagans possibly saw stuff we don't consider in a materialist culture?
That's two questions.
Okay.
That's actually two questions. How much is other pagans possibly saw stuff we don't consider in a material culture? Quite a bit. But it isn't just the pagans who saw stuff we don't consider in a materialistic culture. It's non-pagans too. Everybody back then considered things that we we would not consider today. Like, for example, the idea of storm gods. Storm gods are ubiquitous across ancient Near Eastern culture. We don't see that today. For us, thunderstorms are just, a phenomenological, meteorological event. Back then, they're viewing it as being, part of this higher drama of the gods. Even if they say it's just a thunderstorm, they're going to say, okay, this reminds me of, say, the Baal cycle. Where Baal is coming in and having this combat with the sea god Yam. Okay, so that should answer the second question. Now, how much of the borrowing is a legitimate borrowing of imagery? It's all legitimate borrowing. There's no illegitimate borrowing here. And it's legitimate in two ways. One, it's legitimate because everyone did it. There wasn't anything such as plagiarism back then. Plagiarism is an anachronistic concept. Everyone borrowed from everyone else's culture back then. It's also legitimate because they are repurposing it. They're not using it in the way it was originally sourced in the culture.
Yep.
They're taking it, repurposing it to engage it. So it's legitimate in that way too.
Yeah. My friend Jeff just clarified his question, so I just remembered because he actually does himself he's doing a fair bit of personal research on like UFO phenomena and all that. So by this, when he's saying he just clarified when he says that whether they possibly saw stuff back then that we don't consider, he means like literally like spiritual manifestations, the magics and all that stuff. Like how much of that would you consider, whether it's how much of it is just borrowing images versus, I guess, stuff that's actually based on things they may have seen, like actual spiritual manifestations and that.
Yes.
Like, that's really you reckon? Yeah.
Both. Both. It's both things that they saw in reality, and it is also, say, the borrowing of images too.
Okay. Fair enough. So I know you yourself. You mentioned you didn't go into detail, but like you've seen stuff. As you mentioned on the stream or something sometimes.
Yes, I've seen stuff.
I've seen some stuff, man. No, I kind of wish I could say I have, but I haven't. Although again, depending on which one, maybe it's good that I don't. I don't know, because I know they can be.
It's good that you don't.
Yeah, especially with some accounts you hear of like poltergeists, for example. That stuff is just absolutely messed.
Yeah, it's good that you don't.
Yeah, I guess so.
And don't seek that stuff out.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. That's pretty much why God's saying, hey, don't do that witchcraft and wizardry and all that.
Yeah,
don't get into that crap. But we'll get into one more source now to kind of illustrate. Long time on this one question, but I guess it's like the most important question: how to interpret sources and all that. We'll get into one more, a non-biblical source. So I'll just share my screen. Specifically, this bad boy. Yes, here we go. So actually, let me zoom in a little bit. So this being the depiction of course, the battle of the Delta.
Sea Peoples. Yeah, that's the Sea Peoples invasion of Ramses III.
That's right. Yeah,
and I can figure that out without even seeing that micro text you have at the bottom.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's pretty awesome image. Like I don't really forget it myself. And of course, the other one, the Battle of Jahi, is how you pronounce it, or like the kind of opposite. image, the one that was based in the land battle. I don't know. But thingo. So a little bit of the text on it, on how it basically describes what happens. I'll not very long, at least with the translation thing I have here. So I'll just read it briefly. Now then, the northern countries, which were in their islands, were quivering in their bodies. They penetrated the channels of the river mouths. Their nostrils have ceased to function, so their desire is to breathe the breath. His majesty has gone forth like a whirlwind against them, fighting on the battlefield like a runner. The dread of him and the terror of him have entered into their bodies. They are capsized and overwhelmed where they are. Their heart is taken away. Their soul is flown away. Their weapons are scattered upon the sea. His arrow pieces, whom of them he may have wished, and the fugitive is become one fallen into the water. Bit wooden, okay. His majesty is like an enraged lion attacking his assailant, and his arms plundering on his right hand and powerful on his left hand, like Seth destroying the serpent, quote, evil of character. It is Amun-Re who has overthrown for him and the lands, and has crushed for him every land under his feet. So I guess from the immediate image of this, just when we're looking at it, I guess a historical account. You'll get, I guess, to use the words of some of the skeptical scholars, propaganda. Ooh, propaganda, spooky.
I hate that word, propaganda.
Yeah, same here. It's all its stupid connotations.
Well, here's the problem with propaganda: is the term propaganda is usually followed by "therefore it's fictional," and that's a problem, because just because there's propaganda doesn't mean there's isn't an underlying truth there. I mean, just because there's like spin, political spin here, or in more precise case here, this is religious spin, doesn't mean that there isn't a true event under the surface.
Yeah, that's it.
And it doesn't mean it isn't true from their particular perspective.
Yeah.
It ignores the perspective of the writer.
Yeah, obviously not to get into the whole hyper-relativist forms of reading, the new hermeneutic, as I've heard it mentioned. Not to get into even that, but perspective does matter.
Perspective matters.
Yeah, that's it. But anyway, so other than just seeing it as, it's a bit of history, it's obviously meant to hype up the pharaoh and all that.
Yep.
What else within the context behind the making of this relief are we missing, so that once we realize it gives us a bit more of an accurate view of what this is actually trying to tell us and show us?
What we have here is actually a confederation of essentially sea people tribes. These are peoples that we will know later on in the biblical text as the Philistines. Okay, so this is, in a sense, when the sea peoples invade, and they already start their invasion of, say, the coastal plain of Canaan during the time of Ramses II and Merneptah. We find the tribes already mentioned, like the Sheruhen, the Duoden, the Luca, the Paliset. These are tribes that will later be collectively known as Philistines. And they're making their trek down the coastal plain during early Dynasty 19. And this is after they've sort of invaded and sacked Troy. So they're Greeks. They're essentially Greeks that settled in Asia Minor, but their growing population needed more food. So they start moving down the coastal plain of the Levant, taking Canaanite cities, still don't have enough food. Then they make their way all the way to Egypt. And then they get thrown back. This is where they get thrown back.
Okay. And so there we go with some historical context of that, like why all of this is happening and all that.
Yeah.
In the context of the Bronze Age collapse. And I know a couple of people
now,
in the chat.
Ultimately, they're going to take another approach to getting food eventually, which is to invade the Shephelah. They're going to say, okay, we can't penetrate Egypt. Egypt's just too strong. We can't get in there. So they're going to go eastward into the Shephelah Valley. And this is where they're going to come in conflict with the Israelites during the time of Saul and David. Because both the Israelites and the Philistines are going to be fighting over that Shephelah Valley.
Interesting. Very interesting. So sea peoples are actually in the Bible. There you go.
Mm-hmm. They
That's
are.
something very, very fun. And I guess so there's some historical context to kind of show what the relief is depicting, what's happening, what brought up that event. How about with the relief itself? Is it simply just a thing to just hype up the pharaoh and all that, or is there something more?
No, this was a real event. This was a real historical event.
No. I mean, like with the like they're presenting a true event and all that,
Mm-hmm.
but with the relief itself, because I remember hearing you talk a bit about how these kinds of reliefs by the pharaohs, because I believe this is on a mortuary temple, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's at Medina Habu.
That's it. And
that's at the Temple of Medina. It's located roughly in West Thebes.
Yeah.
Beautiful temple if you ever go there. It's an absolutely phenomenal temple.
Hope to one
full
day.
of stuff that imagery that you actually do find referenced in the Bible.
There you go.
Such as the fat cows. Lots of fat cows at Medina Habu.
There you go. But I remember listening to some of your stuff before, and that these kinds of reliefs, in particular, say on these mortuary temples, or just in general, they weren't just to hype up the pharaoh, but they were considered some form of they're
an offering.
That's it. They were an offering to the gods.
Yeah.
Could you explain that a little bit?
Sure. We see this even in, say, in biblical texts. Why do the Israelites place a piece of Aaron's rod, a jar of manna, and the book of the law in front of the Ark of the Covenant in the tabernacle? It is praising God with the deeds of God. It's this idea of cyclical, reciprocal economy, where you give the deeds of God, and God takes that and does more deeds with it. We find this in say this sort of metaphysics in ancient Egypt, where people give bread to the god, so that the god will take that bread and multiply that bread and give more bread back. So what the king is doing by making these reliefs on the walls of his temples is he's basically telling the god, hey, I did this victory. You keep giving me, and I donate this to you. I lift this up to you. And you as the god now take that victory and give me more victories. It's giving praise to the god.
There you go. Okay, there you go. So that's why I believe you mentioned it in this context. That's the fact that these were offerings to the gods. That's why, for example, you might not see depictions of defeats in these kinds of areas. Like it's not exactly, hey God, he's some absolute crap. You want it? Not exactly
spotted lamb.
Yeah.
The spotted lamb.
That's it. Yeah.
No, Yahweh doesn't want the spotted lamb.
Mm-hmm.
Don't give him the crippled lamb. Don't give him the blind lamb. In Egypt, don't give him the feats.
Yeah, that's it. And
unless you can cobble a victory out of it somehow, you don't dare do it.
Yeah. I guess I won't really go into this. I just kind of want to show this really cool edition of quote unquote the Egyptian Book of the Dead. It's actually a really, really nice volume, like fabric cover and all. Like got all the images, and it actually shows like the whole thing throughout. I believe it's of the Book of the Dead of the Scribe Ani. I believe that's the edition.
Papyrus Ani. It's a British Museum papyrus. Yeah,
that's it. There you go. And it depicts the whole thing and gives the translation and all that. So I just kind of a quick momentary flex. I used this in one of my grade 7 history classes when I did a whole unit on ancient Egypt. Mm-hmm. That was a very, very fun unit. I was gonna ask more like some context on that, but it's gonna go. It's gonna keep going for so long.
There's thousands of editions, thousands of copies of the Book of the Dead.
Yeah, that's why
thousands of them.
The Book of the Dead.
University of Chicago Press has some critical editions of the Book of the Dead that are free for download too. So you can get those online. And that's a wonderful thing that the Oriental Institute has done, is made a lot of its past publications free for download.
That's it.
And it's a great resource. Great resource.
Awesome. And before we transition from should I leave it till then or should I leave it till now? I don't know, because I want to kind of address the argument from silence in legitimate and illegitimate uses and all. I guess I might leave that a little bit towards the towards a bit of a later question. For now that we've looked at literature, basically how to look at literature, how to interpret it, and all that. I guess relief is a kind of literature, quote unquote. But
It is.
This relief in particular kind of bleeds over into the next thing to look at with respect to archaeological evidence. So students may now at this point they'll have some familiarity, some competence at looking at texts, thinking in the mind of the ancient person as they're writing and reading that text, being able to interpret in that respect. But then we get to another dimension of archaeology. So all the cities, all the objects from entire walls to buildings to furniture to the dead farmer with the spoon in the bowl in his grave, among other things. But there's a reference to I believe one of your streams just earlier. So with respect to that archaeological data, it's basically the same thing, but with the literature question. But how should students approach archaeological data and interpret that properly? Because I know that's a big area where there's a lot of prone for error.
Yes, there is a lot of
room for error.
Room for error, and basically it comes down to the fine art of reading field reports, and it's a fine art. What happens where students are likely to come into error when reading field reports is when they read the first reports without really reading the final reports. Okay. A lot of this happens, say, very early on with the excavations at Avaris, where, at the very beginning of when Avaris was excavated by Manfred Betock, they started on the Palace District. And they looked at the Palace District, and then they said, okay, we find occupation here right up until, say, the reign of Amenhotep II, and then they vacate the premises. This led a lot of scholars to say, oh, well, we got now finally proof that the Exodus took place during 1446, during the reign of Amenhotep II. Because we now have an abandonment here from Amenhotep II until Thutmose IV. But later on, what Manfred Betock did is says he switched sites. He switched areas on the tell and started to excavate around the Temple of Baal and found that was the primary area where the Semitic Levantines were staying. And he found a continuity of occupation from the beginning of Dynasty 18 all the way to Ramses II.
Okay, yeah. Very interesting.
So that shows up in the later reports.
Okay. So basically just keep your finger on the pulse. Don't just look at whatever's initially given out or one bit of information. Follow the full continuity, because unlike whereas we might find, for example, let's say when it was found a lost work of Saint Irenaeus of Lyon, 2nd century, his demonstration of apostolic preaching, when we found the full thing in an Armenian manuscript, and you got your translation period, and it's basically all there right in front of you. Like maybe you can find translation and all that. So when you find literature, it's all there in front of you. Whereas with archaeology, it's not like you can just go into creative mode in Minecraft and just get rid of all the dirt straight away. It's like, no, you've got to kind of dig, find more stuff.
Well, here's the thing with archaeology. When you find something in archaeology, it confirms the presence of something, but not finding something there doesn't confirm the absence.
Yes.
See, this is where people jumped the gun at Avaris. Is they saw an absence at the site of the Palace District, and then concluded that, we don't find Levantine Semites here during this period of time, so therefore they never occupied that site. When just 2 doors down, you find occupation.
Yeah, there you go.
And once you find the presence of occupation there, you've confirmed the presence.
Yeah. And there could be many number of reasons for why something where an ancient text, for example, says, X was here, you go there and it's not there.
Yeah.
There could be a number of reasons why it's not there. Like
Yeah.
I believe one of the big ones you mentioned is the reality of site leveling, where they basically
Site leveling, yep.
scrape off everything and it's
Yep.
like it was never there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to become a very, very important dynamic in, say, the future of how we examine sites, especially in the Levant.
True that. True.
Because, you know, if the Israelites are coming in and they're occupying these cities, eventually they're going to want building the way they want to build. In which case they are going to start site leveling.
Yeah.
It makes a bit of sense when you think about it.
Yeah. And this gets into the dynamic of how a historical document or how historical documents mesh with what we find in the archaeology, because it's really necessary when you think about it to approach the texts themselves just with a default of charity, I guess. If assuming you find with you as you would say, I believe you would say yourself, like first you determine the genre, because you don't the text might not even be trying to say something that's actually the case. But if you determine that a text is trying to say this is actually what happened, this is what was the case, you should have some charity and think, okay, by default, it's telling the truth. Let's assume that. Then you go into the archaeology and you find, we can't find a direct evidence of this thing, therefore the text is lying. And of course, with that mentality, you will kind of just erase the vast majority of what we know, especially in these periods of the ancient Near East, where, as you've mentioned in other streams elsewhere, preservation is just awful. It's so little in many periods.
Oh yeah.
So
even such a thing such as site identification, it's still a problem.
True that.
Just because we find a site where we think it should be doesn't mean it is the actual site that's being described.
True that.
One of the big examples of this was, P. Ramses. You know, when Pierre Montet excavated Tanis, he said to himself, I have found P. Ramses. I find all these blocks with the name of Ramses II of it. That's a huge site. It's a big temple. And then Labib Habashis goes, hey, wait, those blocks aren't oriented right if this was the site of Ramses II. They were on their side. So these blocks had been lifted from P. Ramses and brought to Tanis to recycle. And Montet went to his grave thinking he had found P. Ramses when he hadn't. The site was actually at Contir. And now every Egyptologist now believes that the site of P. Ramses is now at Contir.
Okay. Yeah, far out. So misidentification can be.
So misidentification of sites still happens.
Yeah. So I guess this might appeal to that prior principle when we're talking about literature, where don't just assume that you may be wrong with your interpretation of a text. Likewise, with archaeology, have it in the back of your mind somewhere that you might not have the right place. Like, don't
conclusions
get so
may not.
it.
Your conclusions might follow from what you think you have, but a new turning of the spade can change everything.
Yeah, that's it. And I'm glad we addressed that with the argument at least with the archaeological argument from science, because with this will go on, I guess, to the question of like fallacies, common fallacies you might see, which I guess you can probably make a whole book on that yourself. But
there's actually an excellent book that I think every student in history should buy. Which is called Historians' Fallacies by David Hackett Fisher. It's a great book. Every historian needs to read that book.
David Hackett Fisher with an SH?
Yes.
I'm putting it in my chat. SH. Bang. Putting it in my chat for people to see. I'm probably gonna go back through this as I edit it, or not really edit it, but just get timestamps, and I'll find resources that we mentioned here, put them down below so that people can really chase them up and all that. This one in particular, the Historian's Fallacies, very, very good one.
Very good book.
And a similar one, I guess, but specifically in biblical studies, one I just managed to pick up yesterday, Exegetical Fallacies.
Also very good.
Second edition. So specifically focused, for anyone who's interested, specifically focused on biblical studies, reading the scriptures and all that, whether New and Old Testament, and major fallacies that many people will commit with that. And he doesn't just give like an airy-fairy potential example. I have a feeling, so this second edition, 1998, I want to say, I have a feeling that Carson made some enemies when writing this because he directly cites examples of scholars themselves, active scholars, making
He made
those
a lot of enemies with that.
Yeah, he did, or you reckon he did?
He did.
I bet. Because I'm reading it.
I was one of his students. I actually took classes from Carson.
Oh dear. Because I read I read one fallacy in there, for example, regarding like fallacious use of for example, ancient Greek dictionaries and uses of a certain Greek word. And how someone might appeal to a dictionary, it has this meaning, therefore it can mean this in the biblical text, but then they don't see in the dictionary that, hang on, that meaning was from like 500 plus years back, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And he directly cited the example of, I believe these couple of scholars, both of them the last name Mickelson, like he named them, and he said they would make the argument that the Greek word that Paul uses in Ephesians, so like wives submit to your husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church. Whole debate over that between the egalitarians and others and all that, where they would say head doesn't mean an authoritative head. It actually might mean one of the major examples that these Mickelsons would follow, would promote rather, is head means source or origin point, like the mouth of a river. And Carson would say they directly appeal to the Liddell and Scott ancient Greek lexicon, that it means that. But, hang on, they're being fallacious with that because that's an old use and it's questionable whether it was ever later used that way. So... So I can imagine
I wish people would stop using Strongs.
Oh, yes.
I wish people would stop using Strongs.
That should be a whole thing on its own. Argument add Strongs.
Yeah, argument add Strongs.
That is so true. The times I see that, oh man, like seeing how
terrible.
It's terrible. Argue, like not to obviously throw flack on whatever theological persuasion, but seeing someone in a Twitter argument, like specifically an egalitarian, regarding the 1 Corinthians, I believe, 11, where it says for, at least how it's translated, it says for man was not made for woman, but woman for man. And the women say, these translations are really bad because when you look at the particle dia, so dia in ancient Greek meaning through, or with the accusative, it can mean on account of or because of this. And she would say, but if you look at Strong's and you see the use of the, it actually means, and I'm just thinking, what are you doing? What are you doing with Strong's?
Yeah, there's no context in Strong's.
That's it. Like
there's no grammatical context in Strong's.
Yeah, that's it. The whole main use, and still really the helpful use of Strong's, I guess depending on your edition, is just finding the words. Like it's really good with helping you find where the words occur in scripture. It's very helpful that way. But as a dictionary, no.
It makes no differentiation for, say, how a language develops.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, you don't, like, for example, in Hebrew, you have archaic or classical Hebrew, you got a middle Hebrew, and you got a late Hebrew. And then you get into medieval Hebrew.
That's it.
It makes no differentiation between any of that.
Now, someone in the chat saying you were a student of Dr. Carson. Is that true?
I took some classes with him.
Oh, far out! That's awesome. That's awesome. That's really awesome. Wow.
I was a lot of the classes I took was from James Hoffmeyer.
Oh, true that. That's awesome. That's really, really awesome.
Yeah.
But
and then when I went to England and did my PhD, I was a research assistant for Kenneth Kitchen.
Whew, far out. That's for those who don't know. Who would you say are the celebrity equivalents of Hoffmeyer and Kitchen, I guess, for people who don't know?
Well, I mean, Kitchen hasn't gone out and... Kitchen's a very colorful character. I'll say that. He's a very colorful character.
Like, in terms of, like, renown.
I get my tact from him.
I can... Especially with certain recent things, I can see that. But, oh, man. But,
Kitchen was infamous for his tact.
I remember reading like just little snippets of his on the reliability of the Old Testament, specifically looking at this review on this site called Bible Interp for something, basically a liberal hive, that website. I remember seeing it. They gave a review of it and they actually gave like negative comments like, he throws these insults and like shady comments at people who don't agree with him, and they quote some things with him. And I'm just thinking,
I love the low content objections.
I mean, I just want to go back to the purity of like, ancient and medieval scholarship, where people can be full-on thoroughgoing scholars, and then they can throw some shade at people who are just making bad mistakes. I'm all for that.
Oh, I mean, you read the dialogue between Martin Luther and Erasmus.
Oh dear.
And they're hurling mud at each other. They're not. They're not even pretending to be civil. I mean, they're just slinging mud.
And I mean, it's not like some people. It's like come on, if you're going to argue, for example, this lack of archaeological evidence at this point means that there was no conquest of Joshua. It's all fake. And if you're going to argue that, I think you deserve a little bit of shade. Like, come on. You have a little bit of that coming that way, because it just betrays some pretty pathetic method. But
anyone who will double down on basically an absence of evidence argument deserves the mockery they get.
Oh yeah, there you go, 100%.
Because logically fallacious.
That's it. And you know what? This was the best entry into really the next major question on major fallacies you see committed in the fields of history and archaeology and all that. So I guess we kind of just barreled right into it, like especially absence of evidence. If you want to maybe, if you feel like talking more about
it's the number one historian's fallacy.
Sorry?
Absence of evidence arguments are the number one historian's fallacy.
Okay.
And it's essentially a subset of the philosophical universal negation fallacy.
Woo! Spicy words there. Very good words.
But that's what it is. It's a subset of that broader his philosophical fallacy.
Could you explain the broader fallacy there?
Okay. Yep. It's the broader fallacy is like this. I'll give an illustration. It's like an ant climbing on his anthill and saying there's no Tokyo.
Right.
Okay. That's the universal negation fallacy.
Okay. Very interesting. So
absence of evidence arguments are a subset of that. It's you look at a place, you don't find what you expect, therefore you declare it doesn't exist.
Okay, yeah. So to define the universal negation broader thing, generally, it's just you make a certain observation, and from that you conclude that something is just not the case at all.
Not the case at all anywhere. Anywhere at any time. Yeah.
Got ya. That's a huge fallacy. I see. Obviously, I guess we can both say we've seen it a lot.
We just see it. It's a perennial thing in historical disciplines.
Yeah, that's it.
Over and over again.
And even if we might be inclined to think so, given both our experiences, I guess it's not restricted by creed. Like you'll see people make some pretty big arguments. Like if to get into the context I'm most familiar with, for example. So it's a bit more of a roundabout kind of thing, I guess. Particularly with dialogue with Roman Catholics, and that will argue about the church fathers, for example, right? And they'll say definitively, for example, oh look, there's absolutely, let's say what's wonder, but just in general, there's absolutely no fathers according to their reading say this, therefore this view could not have existed. Although I guess that's not really the best one because they're kind of jumble my brain a little bit.
Let me bring one from my field.
You can do it.
Let me bring one from my field. Okay, and I'm not going to pick on the atheist this time. I'm going to pick on the evangelical. I know I'm such a naughty boy. Okay, but you'll get evangelicals who say, well, we have no evidence of the Exodus during the reign of Ramses II, so we have to start looking elsewhere.
Yep.
That's a kind of universal negation. That's a fallacy. That's an absence of evidence argument.
Interesting.
It's a declaration that there's no evidence, therefore we got to look elsewhere. It's not seeing what's actually there. It's the ant getting up on his molehill, on his anthill, and saying there's no Tokyo.
Yeah.
And evangelicals do this all the time. And it doesn't matter if it's a somebody who just supports, say, the early date of the Exodus. It doesn't matter if we're talking about the patterns of evidence guys who support the theories of David Rohl. It doesn't matter if it's talking about the super early Exodus of, say, Gerald Aardsma. Evangelicals are really prone to this.
Yeah.
It's bad historical methodology.
Yeah, very unfortunately. I guess to kind of refine my example with how Roman Catholic, for example, might say, oh, there's you might for example have one church father say something, and of course a Roman Catholic won't like it. Let's say, for example, actually no, perfect example with the Marian dogmas. You might have one or two fathers who, well, very very few of them, at least early on, would even mention Mary at all. But of those who do, they might comment on a passage like, say, when Mary and Jesus, when Mary and her sons, sorry Catholics, will confront Jesus. They'll confront Jesus, and then a church father might say, "Oh, she was overcome by a." Like, to kind of paraphrase, she was overcome by like some want to be more prominent, almost pride, if you will. Yeah. You'll have a church father, like for example, John Chrysostom will say exactly that, as saint in the Roman Catholic Church. And then you'll have a non-father, like Origen, for example. He's a historical Christian, but like not a saint, so I'll kind of pass over that. But then they'll say, apart from those guys, no one else elsewhere denies that Mary, there's no other evidence that no one else denied Mary was sinless. Therefore, this was a universal Christian doctrine that everyone everywhere believed and all that. And it's just, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's a positive statement from an absence of evidence.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And then
because absence of evidence arguments work both ways. Absence of evidence arguments work well. People use absence of arguments to say that to affirm a negative. But people also use absence of evidence arguments to affirm a positive.
That's it, yeah.
The problem is absence of evidence neither confirm or deny. They are nothing at all. They're absolutely nothing. They don't prove anything. They don't disprove anything.
That's it, yeah. Now, I will bring up, so I've got this very, very nice volume right here. I managed, it's like the last one I could see that you could purchase anywhere online, and I can't even find a PDF. It's just, I don't know if you might have seen it, but this one, Guide to Historical Method, Father Gilbert J. Garrigan. It's like this 1940 something volume. I wanted to pick it up for a long time, but there's really only one copy available on Amazon, and nowhere else can I find it to buy. So very lucky pick. But he has actually a half decent section on the argument from silence, and both illegitimate uses and legitimate use of the argument from silence. So I guess to kind of flip it back, you got your absence of evidence argument, which is a straight up fallacy. But then there may be legitimate uses of when you would expect something to be there, but it's not. So I'll read really quickly his criteria for an argument of silence. You can tell me you agree, disagree. I personally agree with it, with maybe some additions to it. But what he says is, to be valid, the argument from silence must fulfill two conditions. The writer whose silence is invoked in proof of the non-reality of an alleged fact would certainly have known about it and had it been a fact, knowing it, he would, under the circumstances, certainly have made mention of it. So,
that second criteria is almost impossible to prove.
Sorry, say that again.
That second criteria is almost impossible to prove.
Would you say there may be, like, would you personally know of any exceptions to that?
This is the problem with it. Let's say you do, like there was several biographies on Babe Ruth. There was official biography, there was an unofficial biography. There's one biography out there that's an authority that is a close source, but doesn't at all mention Babe Ruth's baseball career. Now, you could argue that this writer knew about Babe Ruth's baseball career. And knowing about it, he had to have written about it. But he chose not to.
Yeah.
So it doesn't follow that just because he knew about something that he was compelled to write about it. That's an impossible statement to prove.
Would you say that there could at least, I don't know if you would know of any examples where, given any kind of postulated big idea of this certain idea of whether a writer would have said it or not, would you say that there still could be a scenario where you can look at a text and say, okay, if a writer really believed this, he would have said it here? Would you say?
Well, usually where you might find this is on direct cross-examination, where a question is put directly to the guy where he is compelled in the instance.
Yeah.
And if he is compelled in the instance and says, I don't know of such a thing, maybe. And that's, then you've got to ask, well, did he just forget? Did it happen later on? Did it, this is why it's still spurious.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually get you where you want to go.
Right.
Because there can still be other reasons why he doesn't say it. Maybe he doesn't want to malign the person involved.
Yeah. Yeah, there's many reasons why you can think that, going back to that principle of historical charity again. And I think it's important I raise it, at least for myself, because on the, at least for me, the 28th, so I think for you, the 29th maybe, or no, the 27th, I actually have a presentation on the Ecclesiology of Clement of Rome, like all the way back in the first century, in the first Clement letter. So absolutely fantastic source there. And I intend to, towards the end, specifically in comparison with Roman Catholic and Orthodox ecclesiology, I intend to make what I believe is a legitimate appeal to silence in terms of some, because some of his letter, I know, I see your face there already, because seeing your
that's dicey.
It can be
dicey.
That's why I don't take it lightly.
Don't.
I believe we have such an instance in the letter where, in an indirect way, he is. Go on. Yeah.
I think you're always stronger off showing the presence of something than the absence of something.
That's exactly how I intend to actually do that. Where I say Clement's ecclesiology, because we have that scenario where he's compelled to answer the question. He is being posed the question, and he's compelled to answer it. Okay. This is his ecclesiology, and he does give something else as opposed to what Rome and the East say. Yeah. That's kind of how I intend
here is the exception. There is an exception to the absence of evidence argument. Is when you find something else.
That's it. Yeah. So not mere absence.
It's not mere absence.
Not merely absence.
Never argue from mere absence. But let's say, for example, the history of the chariot. This is the big one. And we find the development of the chariot well documented in Egypt. So we find that extant from the beginning of the Hyksos period onwards. Its early development, the import of horses, the breeding of horses, the burials of horses. We do find the bridal at Avaris for the first time. Yeah. We have war reliefs that predate that show no chariots. So we can say that the terminus date, the early terminus date for the chariot is at the beginning of the reign of the Hyksos.
Yeah.
And it doesn't predate that in any meaningful way. Now, that is a kind of absence of evidence argument, but it falls under that exception where we can show where it developed.
Yeah.
We've got hard evidence to show when it developed, where it developed, how it developed.
That's it, yeah. So there's actually something to build off on.
You're showing the negation through the presence.
Yeah, yeah. Which you can then contrast with, let's say, some skeptical scholar or layman who will say the conquest of Joshua didn't happen because we don't have direct evidence, but they don't have anything else to really explain the data. So it's just mere absence. Rather than saying, here's another explanation from the data of something that did happen, but then it got corrupted and eventually became the Israelite tradition. They may try to say that, but it's obviously on the basis.
If you can show the presence of something else, that's the exception.
Yeah,
and all fallacies have their exceptions.
Yeah, that's it. But even then, you can kind of imagine maybe a scenario where something else is there, but maybe the other thing just wasn't somehow mentioned. Although that'd be a bit of a tighter case.
That's a tighter case. That's a stretch.
Much tighter case. Yeah, it will kind of prove a little bit of a
But if you can show the presence of something else.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if we were to take the Marian, thing, and if you had say some church father mention, yes, Mary was needed the salvific qualities of Christ as well because she was a sinner too.
Yeah,
that's showing the absence of a sinless Mary through the presence of something else.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. And as well as like direct quotations through, let's say, Origen or John Chrysostom or a few other people who would say Mary committed a naughty at some point.
Yeah.
And that would appeal to passages which even I, as a Protestant who would otherwise believe Mary sinned, I would personally say it doesn't really show that. Like they go further than many Protestants do on that topic to show that Mary sinned at some point. But obviously a bit of a tangent, but a very relevant one, and especially for myself, my channel, and my buddy in the chat, A Goy for Jesus, Jeff, because we do a lot of interaction with Roman Catholics on our channels. So big part of that. Very helpful on the issue.
But showing the presence of something is proper historical method.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Simply tearing stuff down is raw skepticism, and skepticism shouldn't be conflated with historiography. Yeah. And okay, so that's really like what you would say, and I would agree. The biggest fallacy you might find,
that's the biggest
modern
fallacy.
Historical, modern archaeological context. What are some other fallacies that are quite pervasive, even if not as popular?
Well, elevating private interpretations to a one reading fallacy. The one reading fallacy is big. Okay, we find this all over the place. We find this. We do find this in atheistic circles. We find this in fundamentalist circles. Basically, I sometimes quip that the biggest problem to reading the Bible is what we learned in Sunday school when we were 6 years old.
Yeah.
Because that forms an idea of the Bible that we just don't depart from later in life. Another book I would add to your list of interpretation books there is Grant Osborne's Hermeneutical Spiral.
Okay, so what I remember hearing that term, reading it from Carson himself. What specifically does that book go through?
It goes through hermeneutical method, but it also talks through some fallacies as well. There's some overlap between Carson and Osborne here. They're actually colleagues, and Osborne was another one of my teachers. But
there you go.
Yeah, I had quite the pedigree.
But I lay claim to who I thought you would have known of, because he actually is quite famous, Dr. Rick Watts. He did his PhD and then a book on the use of Isaiah in the book of Mark. I was slightly disappointed you didn't know of him, because he should be kind of near you at Regent.
Well, I don't know everybody.
I thought you would at least know him. I like to think he's a big name. Oh man, but
both Carson and Osborne will talk about this one meaning fallacy, which is you can only interpret a piece of text one way.
Yep.
Or there's one meaning to a word.
Yeah.
Very, very common. We see this a lot in interpretation.
Yeah. So good example, probably with your Holy Kool-Aid video response, where he would say, "Oh, it says all the cities were destroyed."
Yeah,
and it just said that. It just says all cities were destroyed with fire. I mean, I guess that's not. Well,
really, it doesn't even have it with fire.
Yeah. That
text doesn't have with fire.
Yeah. Or honestly,
it's just all harem.
Yeah, that's it.
The Hebrew word is harem.
No, that's it. Harem. The use of harem would be the relevant one there. Although even that's not even just a one meaning fallacy. It's just straight up not reading the text at all. But
no, it isn't.
It's like you don't even need to know that. You don't even you can commit the fallacy if it's still whatever. Get away from it.
One of the interesting words we find harem used all across Semitic languages.
Yes.
It comes from haramu in the East Semitic Akkadian. And in haramu, in the case of haramu, it just means to be set apart. It then develops meaning later on in other Semitic languages. We even find it used in Arabic. The pyramids are called the harem. They're forbidden. It's a graveyard. Stay away from there. It's set apart.
That's it. Yeah.
It also develops into the word that becomes a harem, as in a group of wives that the king had that were set apart.
That's it.
So this word has a lot of different meanings. And context is where we find the differentiation between the meanings.
Yeah. I've noticed it has a very, very wide semantic range, that word.
It does.
So, as you mentioned, it can refer to setting something apart. It can refer to, if I remember, driving out, I believe.
Yep, driving out is another.
So you got almost at least two different senses of it, like either setting apart or just
four different senses.
Oh, frick! There you go.
Destroy, set apart, drive out, a harem for women.
Yeah, that's it. There you go. Because I remember like seeing some scholars or whatever argue that with the use of harem and how it refers to setting things apart, including sacrifices, that the use of harem for Joshua's conquest, for example, was actually a giant human sacrifice. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the whole idea of harem being used to destroy the cities and the walls themselves is just kind of ridiculous anyway, because it sort of defeats the point of the whole Joshua conquest.
Yeah.
Which is essentially to take over the cities,
yeah,
occupy people's houses, eat the food off their plates, tend their vineyards. They're setting up home. They're not destroying and pillaging for the sake of ransacking and going back somewhere else.
There you go.
They want to capture these cities as much intact as possible. It's only if a city is so egregious that they'll burn the whole thing to the ground.
Yeah, that's it. Like unless you have something, it's not really something you just assume.
No,
that word. Among other things, like and of course across context with different words, you don't just assume that's what's going to happen. You might have something explicit, like with Joshua's speech, for example, where he says every man, woman, and child, and all that jazz. But then then you go elsewhere, and it doesn't say that explicitly. It doesn't have to mean that, and from other contexts, it can mean something totally different.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have the evidence from how even the text itself will say there's certain survivors from the city, so even that doesn't.
Don't marry them.
Don't kill everybody doesn't necessarily mean that.
Yeah, harem the city and all its inhabitants, but don't marry them.
Oh, there you go.
It's the bridal zombie apocalypse.
Oh, dude, that has some not so good connotations to that. Oh boy.
Now I've made an enemy of all the brides.
Is there such a phenomenon in any anime you watch? Or I mean, in the world of anime, anything's possible.
That's true.
I think we both know that. Oh man, that's funny. Okay, other fallacies, because like those pretty much appear to be like really the argument from silence makes up like 90% of fallacies I see, but and then that other one takes up even more.
There are other fallacies such as parallelomania, where you take an unrelated or a modern, say, meaning or etymology, and then try to paste it back into the ancient history.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of these. I mean, there's not just one fallacy here.
Yeah.
If they want to see, like, for example, the whole format of our popcorn videos is essentially taking a video and dissecting it for its logical and its historical value.
That's it.
Yes, it's entertainment too, but it's primarily for to be used as a teaching tool for logical analysis of historical types of videos. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, I intend to talk a lot about that stuff. Get that book by Hackett Fisher. Stuff I've already learned myself, both in videos and, God willing, back in the classroom one day. Students, kids, don't go the way of Dr. So and so. Don't go the way of. Do you want to continue the drama stuff? But don't go the way of Dr. Bowen. Don't say what they.
There is some weird argumentation there. That's for sure.
There is. I don't know if my channel's going to get rated now, but I'm a lab. I can take it, so whatever. But so all sorts of kinds of tons and tons of little fallacies right there.
Yeah.
I guess we've covered like a big bunch of them. I guess really the main ones in particular that are most pervasive.
The ones we see most often.
That's it, yeah. And then really the rest of the answer being buy Hackett Fisher's book.
Yeah,
that's really
a good book on informal fallacies too is also very helpful. Although I don't know one off the top of my head.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, fair enough.
Informal fallacies will get you a long ways.
Okay. What would for anyone watching, what's the nature of an informal fallacy versus
an informal fallacy is a fallacy that happens during argumentation. Okay, so in normal human discourse, as opposed to, say, formal fallacies, which are fallacies of symbolic logic.
Okay. Yep. Very interesting.
Like, for example, affirming the consequent.
Yeah.
The equivocation fallacy, using two meanings and then using them interchangeably in your argument, and it obfuscates the argument.
Yeah, that's it. So with respect to the very discourse itself, not really the claims themselves. So whereas you would have the argument from silence, which is the nature of the claim itself.
Yeah.
Whereas equivocation and things like that, that's with you.
I did a video recently which actually looked at how to address the whole topic of reading the Bible literally, where the equivocation fallacy was used. It's using literally in 2 or 3 different ways.
That's it. There you go. And I guess that's really the big bulk of how I want to discuss stuff. How we went through so much of the stuff, how to get yourself started in doing history, what to keep in your mind, context, and all, how to read the text itself, how to interpret archaeological data. And for under 2 hours as well, obviously there's many things we I guess we couldn't address in so short a time. But I guess what we've done so far is a really, really good stepping stone, God willing. So I think this stream is going to heavily benefit many people.
I hope so.
And so now I guess to kind of begin the end point, the third act, if you will. Are there any exciting archaeological developments in Egyptology or anywhere else in ancient Near East that you're aware about happening right now?
Yes.
Ooh, yes. Let's hear it.
I can't tell them.
Oh, fuck. Sake, mate.
Here's the thing: when archaeological digs happen in the ancient Near East, there is some discussion that happens behind closed doors, but you can't talk about them because the publication hasn't come out yet.
Oh man, come on!
There's some very interesting stuff happening at Tanis right now. Tell you that. There's some interesting stuff happening at Tanis. Last time I was there, I was not allowed to take photographs of a certain section.
Okay. Interesting.
There's also some very interesting stuff coming out of the Wadi Tumalot right now.
For anyone who doesn't know, what's the Wadi Tumalot?
This is a wadi that it connects essentially. It's a little wadi that runs, west to east in Egypt on the eastern side of the delta.
Okay.
In the middle of the Wadi Tumalot is where Pithom is located.
Okay.
From Exodus 1:11, where it talks about building the storage cities of Ramses and Pithom.
Okay.
That's where Pithom is.
Okay.
There's some very, very interesting stuff coming out of the Wadi Tumalot right now.
Okay. That's interesting. How about anything where there is public stuff published, but it is ongoing right now? Anything you can mention that you know about?
Well, I mean, there was some recent. There's a recent discovery of the Jeroboam inscription.
That's true. Yeah, I remember.
That was very interesting. I think there's one aspect of that was sort of underplayed. The date of that inscription dates to the time of the judges. Everyone sort of agrees with that. The geography is a little off. It's a little further west and south than we would expect Jeroboam to find out. So there's a lot of people, and even I'm kind of a little saying
maybe some non-Israelite just took the pot and ran. I don't know.
Well, no, but there's the idea that this was just the name of a Canaanite, not the original Gideon.
Right.
But here's the one thing that makes me think that would have been originally applied to the original Gideon, which is Jeroboam is a pejorative. It literally means let Baal contend with him. Let Baal argue with him.
Interesting.
Nobody in their right mind names their son that.
Unless.
Unless.
Well, not naming their son, but
Yes.
unless.
A Canaanite wouldn't do this.
Okay.
It's a pejorative.
So
it's
this
a
could
pejorative.
So this could be something potentially from the hand of Gideon himself,
Potentially,
maybe.
Or one of his servants,
or that which is pretty awesome.
His wine steward.
something to add on top of the other things we have: the seal of Hezekiah, the seal. The personal thing of Nathan something, forgot his name. Of one of the kings.
Seal of Baruch.
Yeah, and even the one of Jezebel. That's confirmed, is it? The seal of Jezebel?
The problem with the seal of Jezebel is we have so many people named Jezebel it isn't even funny.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's such a common name.
The fact that it's a seal, though, would that
seals were commonly used,
even among non-royals?
Even among say scribes, royalty, elites, aristocracy, and Jezebel was such a common name. It's kind of like Abimelech.
Right. Yeah.
Abimelech's a very, very common name. There's like 21 different Abimelechs identified in Canaan. Because it's a name that means my father was king.
Fair enough. Okay, got ya. Well, before we get to Q&A, would you like to plug your stuff, anything?
The only thing I'd love to plug is my book, The Ark of the Covenant, and it looks like you have one there.
The Ark of the Covenant. He was curious. Very good read. Oh, sorry. Hang on. Very good read. I love it myself. The pictures are just great. It just activates my 8-year-old self.
Well, we want to create a book that could apply. That somebody could enjoy from all age groups and all levels of learning. And that's a very, very that's like the hardest task to do as a writer, is to write something that will appeal to someone with no education and to someone who's a scholar. There's something in there for everyone. We also wanted to make a book that was just a beautiful book. So I went to Egypt. I took all the pictures myself, came back and gave the publisher a pile of pictures and said, "Here, I want to put all these in the book."
Okay.
And the pictures are they're just gorgeous. They are definitely I went through the whole process of learning travel photography just to do this book. So the pictures in there are really, really stunning, even if I do say so myself.
Oh, they are. I can attest to that. Pretty darn awesome. And in fact, I'll drop the link right here in the chat for anyone. For anybody who is interested to go to that right now, and I'll put it in the description later on. It is an awesome book. Really awesome book. I love it. And even
there's over 100 pictures and diagrams in there.
Yeah, that's it. And even the little storytelling you do towards the start, it's kind of cool to get the imagination going.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very good stuff. Before we Q&A first. So going to the Q&A now. So now I will start to pick out the comments from people, the questions they've given throughout and questions they've given now. Let's start off with this banger. Could you ask Dr. Falk to laugh like he did in that review video of Inspiring Philosophy?
He can ask.
Let's just say
that was a one-off.
Let's just say
okay. Look, I have a very hearty laugh. I have a very hearty laugh.
It's something. It's really the stuff of legends. It challenges the voice from Dune and from the Elder Scrolls.
Dovahkiin.
I should make that a mod. I don't know.
The whole laugh thing. It was just that it was the first time I saw that video. It caught me off guard as to this is something that would just be so ridiculous to the Egyptological mind that you're just like, did he just say that?
I feel like that's something.
Automatic response was just to burst out in laughter. It wasn't like planned.
That only could have happened in otherwise a very good video and a very good, lay scholar, I guess, like Inspiring Philosophy, because like you read, you watch and react to ridiculous stuff by like Ron Wyatt, for example, right? And you don't come to anywhere near that level because you're expecting it. You're watching a video by Inspiring Philosophy and you find errors in it, but it's still got some level of competence to it.
Yeah, and he's deadpan. He's deadpan all the way through, very serious all the way through, and then this happens.
Oh man,
it's not something that can be replicated.
But
because it was a combination. It was a combination of me being tired, having some less social guards at that point,
That's it. Yeah.
Combined with, say, the ridiculousness of the statement.
That's basically me after a few drinks with the boys. Yeah. Like I feel like if I was at a party with some guys, I've had a few Tui's new or whatever, I'm still fine. But then suddenly someone plays something, someone plays something by, I don't know, Holy Kool-Aid. I feel like that would be me.
Yeah.
but or just anything else.
But I'll say this too, though. Some of Michael Jones's Inspiring Philosophies videos are very good. Oh, even some of his historical stuff is very good. Like his one on Joseph is excellent.
There you go.
That I mean, he did a really bang up good job on the one on Joseph.
There you go. Yeah. But to answer Alpha and Omega Reform's question directly, let's just say I won't have to ask him today. I'll put it at that. I won't have to ask him to love. Here's one from Tusmatos Tui. I presume that's okay. What do we know when we have only hostile exaggerating primary sources? E.g., we only have Epiphanius attesting to some Egyptian Christian sects. It's more than merely adjusting our level. Is it more than just merely adjusting our level of confidence?
Yeah, it is. Okay. We do have to give the primary source the benefit of the doubt.
Yep.
This is just good textual reading method. And this isn't just something that applies to, say, Christian documents. This goes all the way back to Aristotle. Aristotle talks about this in Ars Poetica, where De Arte Poetica, where he talks about these sophists who are saying, ha, 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 Homer has all these errors. And Aristotle tells the sophists, hey, wait. The primary source, the benefit of the doubt is with the source, not the critic.
Very interesting.
Okay.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
So even if we have only hostile or exaggerated primary sources, they are given the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, that's it. Perfect example.
Until we have evidence to the contrary.
That's it, yeah. And a perfect example would be with Irenaeus of Lyon. His own work against heresies was all we had, basically, of primary attestation of various Gnostic beliefs. And, of course, that was a hostile source. So people might ask the question, Guru Gar, he's biased, propaganda, Christian man bad, and all that jazz. But then we find the Nag Hammadi library with all those, with that entire library of Gnostic texts. And
it's weird.
And it is. Really, there's definitely evidence for weed use there. I will say that. Just from that alone, maybe some more exotic stuff we don't even have in our possession today. Who knows?
They've been dipping too much in the opium from Cyprus.
It's just like Valentinus one day. It's just standing there. He's like, bro, what about this Sophia guy? And they have like 8 children, and they're called like aeons.
Splinters of the Forge, yeah.
And then I feel like Marcion comes along. And he's like, "Bro, let me have some of that." But yeah, we have the Nag Hammadi library, and I can't say with every exact detail, but even just reading through myself, for example, the Gospel of Truth, which is probably the one mentioned by Irenaeus himself, written by Valentinus. Yeah. And he's correct. He's correct in what they're saying and what they're claiming. Oh, yeah. Like, maybe there's some interpretation going on here and there, but he's giving an accurate description of what they're believing.
Well, this is how one of the things we have to do when we read the Church Fathers too. Is one of the problems we have when we gauge the Church Fathers today is that they had a lot longer attention span than we do today.
That's it. Yeah.
We live in a Twitter world.
Yeah.
200 characters were lost. Okay, they can go 50 pages and they expect you to retain all that as lead up to their argument.
Yep.
So when the Church Fathers are writing, they're doing a carefully constructed case, and then they get to it.
Yeah.
This is very typical first century Greek Latin prose.
Yep. That's it. So that's basically how you should address that, Mr. Tui. Kind of like Tui's new. That's kind of how I'm going to pronounce it. But yeah, basically hostile sources.
How's it going, Sumitos?
Benefit of the doubt. That's it. I remember. I've seen him in your streams as well.
Oh yeah.
So there's some relations here.
He's a friend.
That's it. There you go. There you go. We're going to build a little nice little wholesome Christian community here where we dunk on pseudo scholars and and other scholars who otherwise make some cringe takes. But yeah, that's basically that. Because the general assumption has to be that humans, generally speaking, by default, we tell the truth. At least as far as we perceive it. Like, because if you default with skepticism, well, for one, you should be consistent with that. But then if you are, you have to treat every human as like a liar by default.
It's not an equal standard.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, because if they were to apply, for example, skeptics, quote unquote, were to apply skepticism consistently across, not just ancient history, not just modern history, but just as a hermeneutic of life. Yeah. If they were to apply consistently, you couldn't live, because now you have to assume that everyone in your life is just a liar or just misled by default. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I've heard Bowen say that he applies the same standard when he does a religious text versus, say, a biblical text versus a non-biblical text, but it really isn't true.
I mean, personally,
nobody goes out basically saying, I need to debunk Enuma Elish.
There you go.
Or the Sumerian kings. No one is debunking those things. I mean,
I can personally believe him when he says that, because you see with skeptical historians, the ones who actually are more consistent with their skepticism across the board, and you'll see them likewise making other loony claims of, oh, look, there's an absence of evidence of this secular history, therefore it's fake. So and so even beyond the issue of scripture and the truth of the faith and all that stuff, it's just generally a bad hermeneutic. Whereas giving the benefit of the doubt to people is something that works across all areas of life, from your personal day-to-day interactions all the way back into ancient history. Is it infallible? No, of course not. You're going to find evidence of someone who's either misled or misleading themselves. Point being, though, is that you actually wait for that evidence, because otherwise, generally speaking, humans tell the truth. And that's how you can get a coherent historical method.
Yeah. And when we look at, say, documents from, even going up into the Iron Age, all those documents are religious documents. All of them.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, tax receipts may not be religious, but they might have, say even on a tax receipt, they might say, recorded in the Temple of Shemesh.
There you go.
So even there, you're going to find religious interference in, say, the documents of domestic life.
There you go.
When you make a treaties are done in the name of gods.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
They're religious documents too.
That's it. So we hope that was a very satisfactory answer. Got a long, big answer on that one. Hopefully it was very helpful. With this next one, this one, of course, probably the question of questions of popular Egypt and ancient Near East and all that. Ask him what caused the Bronze Age collapse. And likewise, our boy Sumatos, how you pronounce it again? I don't know. I'll just say Tui. He likewise also asked, I've always wanted to ask him about that. How did Egypt weather the Bronze Age collapse so well?
It didn't.
Oh, dear.
It didn't weather the Bronze Age collapse quite so well. It just happened a little later. One of the things we have to remember about the Bronze Age collapse, and unfortunately, Eric Klein's book, 1177 BC, The Year Civilization Collapsed, gives sort of a misleading picture of the Bronze Age collapse, because the title almost infers that it happened in a specific year. Now, he wanted to name that book 1184, because that's where he sort of pegged it closer. But it's still the same problem.
Okay.
Which is the Bronze Age collapse happened centuries before and centuries after. It was a gradual thing. It might have culminated near 1184. But the signs of it were happening much, much earlier. Like, for example, during the reign of Merneptah, which is roughly around 1217 BC, he's already getting pleas from the Hittite emperor for food shipments because they're starving in Anatolia. And Merneptah makes a big deal of this. Oh, we gave them food because we saved the Hittite Empire because Egypt is so great. But after the reign of Merneptah, things quickly go downhill in Egypt. There's after the Merneptah, there's a succession crisis. There's his successor, Seti II, is deposed from the throne by Amenmesis. And then Seti II has to retake the throne. Then you get the rise of a female queen at the end of Dynasty 19.
As opposed to a male queen.
As opposed to a male king, yeah. But Tuaset takes the throne, and she is anytime you have a dynasty end with a female ruler, that's a bad sign. It shows general weakness in the dynasty. And that's been true across the board. The only exception is Hatshepsut.
Okay.
There have been other dynasties that have also ended in female rulers, and it usually means the end of something.
Right.
The kingdom's in a bad state at that point.
Right.
And then you get a usurper come to the throne, Setnach, and he starts Dynasty 20. And then his son, Ramses III, has a glorious reign, but his 30-year reign ends in strife.
Right.
There's labor strikes. There's hyperinflation. There's food shortages. And then there's the king ultimately gets assassinated. And then his successor, Ramses IV, loses control over the Levant, Nubia, and Libya.
Okay.
They lose all their hegemonic holdings.
Right. So
they're not faring well through the Bronze Age collapse either.
Yeah.
But it's this Bronze Age collapse that helps, say, the Philistines and the Israelites establish their presence in Canaan.
Yeah. So the collapse was more so the Bronze Age slow-mo dive, if you will.
It's the Bronze Age slow-mo dive. But we're already seeing signs of this in, say, the Amarna period. Already during the reign of Akhenaten, we're seeing in the Levant that the population of these city-states is declining. And it declined even to the point where cities only had enough men to man their walls, but not defend them adequately. So we see in the Amarna letters all these squabbling city-states going at each other's throats.
Interesting.
And Egypt not really caring what they do internally.
Yeah. So you would say, I think maybe to frame his question, because as far as I've read with the Bronze Age collapse, whereas everyone else just straight up died, every other major nation, Egypt kind of survived, but not.
It kind of survived, but it lost its hegemony.
Yeah, that's it. So I guess that's more what Tui here means when he says it weathered it so well. I guess in comparison to others.
But here's what happened though. Even though it weathered it well, Egypt depended on its hegemony to shore up its inflation.
Oh dear.
What happened in Egypt was economic collapse. And this ultimately resulted in the decline and eventual overthrow of the Ramessides.
Okay. All right. So there you go. I hope that was a good answer to that question. Hopefully that clarifies a lot of things. There's a lot of really good videos you can find on Bronze Age collapse. One in particular that I've seen that basically explains the systems collapse theory, which if I remember correctly, you partially subscribe to that. Somewhere?
Partially.
Yeah.
My only issue with it is that it's not punctiliar.
Right. Okay.
It's not that slow buildup and rapid collapse. It's not that. It is happening, and it is happening in systems, but it's happening slowly.
Yeah. Got ya.
And the recovery is slow too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough. Really good video on that. I guess more wholly subscribing to systems collapse, but it does bring up some really, really interesting evidence. I believe it's by the channel Historia Civilis, or to go accurate with my Latin, Historia Civilis, something like that. But I love
the languages.
Oh yeah, that's it. I love learning my Latin. That's the one I'm currently at as well, alongside my Greek. But next one is this one by Thesiravan. Are you familiar with Benjamin Sommer's thesis about divine bodies? If so, what are your thoughts on it? Does it render a threat to those that think of God as transcendent?
I don't know his work.
Right.
I'm going to have to basically plead ignorance here. I have not read his work. I'm not familiar with his theory.
I guess to kind of salvage this a little bit, I presume it refers to maybe a belief that the gods, so to speak, did have bodies, but up in a heavenly, like actual bodies, but up in a heavenly realm.
No. That I would say that I would give an absolute no.
Okay, so they didn't think that.
They didn't think they did not think the divine people had divine bodies. They had to. Right. They thought that they had to provide them with bodies.
Okay,
that's the whole reason idols exist in the ancient Near East. It's to give the gods bodies.
Go ahead.
The people of the ancient Near East, at least in the late Bronze Age, were under no illusion that their gods were spirits. I mean, they thought that the gods were spirits. Mm-hmm. And whether the idol was used to appease the god, give them a body where they could interact with the god, or whether it was to trap the god in a body as an idol to extort them or blackmail them, which did happen in certain religious contexts.
Yeah.
Either way, they had an idea. They had this sort of dichotomy between the pneumatology of gods and the somatology of a god. The idea of the pneumatology being the spiritual aspect of the god, having to indwell an idol in order to have a body that they can interact with the world.
Got you.
We also see this language even in, say, Genesis. You know, when mankind is made, he is made in the image of God, in the form and the likeness. Now, these are both terms used of idols.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? And the whole idea is God is making the body of man for his spirit to inhabit. His likeness of spirit to inhabit.
Got ya. Okay. I hope that answers the question. That's a very good answer on my part. Like, hopefully that's actually relevant to his thesis, because that's kind of what it sounds like.
Yeah, I don't know his thesis. I haven't read it.
That's kind of what it sounds like, the way you frame it that way. I've kind of thought of that idea myself. Did the ancients actually think that way? But I guess Dr. Falk's answer kind of helps me out that way.
Now, the idea of God as transcendent, we first find this actually with the Ten Commandments.
Okay.
There was no such thing as transcendent deity prior to the Ten Commandments.
They were all related to some aspect of reality.
All gods, even though they're spirits, live inside the creation they make. So the gods are not apart from creation. They're inside their own creations. It's only with the Ten Commandments that we start seeing, say, the metaphysics of God making a creation and then resting from it, away from it.
Yeah.
That's new with the Ten Commandments.
Yeah, shall not make an image of any created thing on heaven or on earth.
And it's not just that. It's not just that. It's also the sixth day. Okay. For in 6 days, God created the heavens and the earth and then rested from it. Interesting.
There you go. Far out. So I hope that was a great answer. I definitely thought it was myself. God willing, it's actually relevant to the thesis. Sounds like it. So let's go on. Also from the same man himself. I don't know what you're going to think about this question, but where would you put yourself theologically if you had to explain your views from your perspective?
I'm an evangelical Christian.
What denomination specifically?
Not going to answer that one. Nice try.
Nah, don't worry.
I have very, very good reasons for not answering that.
No,
one of the reasons is because on my channel we have such a wide diversity of people who participate. We have Christians of all denominations participate. We have Muslims. We have some atheists. We have pagan religions. We have a huge diversity of people who participate on our channel. So for us, if I started, bringing out what my denomination is, it would end up would pigeonhole me, and then we'd get some people who turn off just because, I can't listen to him. He's part of that
I mean,
that group.
To be fair, you do kind of do that already by admitting you're evangelical.
Yeah, but evangelical is such a broad.
Yeah, but then
it can cover evangelical can cover anything from evangelical Catholic to evangelical, fundamentalist. It can be anything in the gambit.
I mean, look, at the bare minimum, you're gonna get the screeching from the hardcore skeptics, as we've kind of seen over the past few days, I guess.
Yes. I'll tell you what, I'm not an atheist. I have been accused of being an atheist.
I can honestly look, just from a very first glance, if someone just did not know who you were and they saw your video on inspiring philosophy, they could probably conclude. Actually, my own friend who's been having these questions, and I've been helping him like, this video says Moses doesn't exist and I'm worried, blah, 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 and all that. And I basically helped them along saying, look, they're historic, like mainly this video from Infographics Show, I think, which I think some people have suggested you react to. But I say to them, look, it's historically bankrupt. He uses the same cliche fallacies that so many other skeptics and liberal Christians will use. Here's why it's bunk or whatever. And then I'll even point him to your videos. And I mention you to him, and he says, and I tell him you're an evangelical Christian. And he's like, oh, what, really? He was actually surprised. He didn't think you were by watching his stuff straight away, which I guess can be a good mark in a way, because you're not, I guess.
Well, I mean, a lot of the early daters think I'm worse than an atheist. Yeah.
Of course. There you go.
Yeah. So that you do get people who do think I'm on the atheist side of this debate, and I'm not. Oh dear.
But I guess that answer of wanting to
that's
have like an umbrella in your audience, I guess that is such a.
This is one of the reasons.
Practice answer.
Oh, I think this is one of the reasons why we're getting so much yelping right now from the atheists too, because they saw the original Michael Jones video and thought, "Oh, we got an ally here."
He debunked him. Him.
Yeah. And I mean, after the Michael Jones video, I got like a half dozen invites from atheist channels I had never heard of.
Oh, of course.
to come on and discuss, how I hate how Christians and apologists so much. And it's like, what? Huh? Are you kidding me?
Like, bro, and then you just say, bro, his Joseph video is great. Go watch that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, how dare you betray the tribe?
So I think amongst some of them, there is probably the sense of betrayal because they assumed something from me that I never told them.
I'm just thinking straight up in my head, just Kylo Ren going, traitor!
Yeah, probably.
Oh, man.
Your next meme, huh?
Well. But so I guess that's the answer. It's such a very typical Baptist non-denominational answer, if I may guess myself. But I'm going to have an open umbrella.
I will neither confirm nor deny.
I have my guesses. But we have this one from Karis now. Question for Dr. David. How much of ancient Jewish worship was influenced by ancient Egypt, whether copying a practice or doing the exact opposite of one?
Lots. Lots. And the reason why is they spent no more than 350 years in Egypt. They had a temple. The Semitic Asiatics had a temple of Baal at Avaris, where they did a lot of Egyptian-like practices. A lot of the laws are in reaction to Egyptian culture. A lot of them are here's the Bible's really circumspect about its Egyptian roots, which is it will approve of some things and disapprove of others. That come from the Egyptian culture. So it's not just that they're copying; they're engaging.
Yeah. There you go.
The prohibition from eating pork. The Egyptians didn't eat pork. And God more or less said, this is a good practice. Keep it up when you go into the promised land.
Yeah, bro.
Circumcision. It was practiced by Abraham too. It's practiced by the Egyptians. Hey, it's good. Continue doing it.
Yeah, and for this reason.
Yeah, for this reason. Yeah, this is your sign of the covenant to Abraham.
Yep, there you go.
Just because it's Egyptian, or the Egyptians did it, doesn't mean it's bad.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes Christians overreact to this. It's the Hitler brushed his teeth, so therefore you shouldn't brush your teeth either.
It's that meme. Yes, that meme of the. I think it's a it's a picture of Donald Trump drinking a glass of water right next to Adolf Hitler drinking a glass of water.
Yes.
the argument ad Hitlerum.
But then there's some Egyptian practices that it definitely forbids, which is adultery. Adultery was rife in ancient Egypt. Extramarital sex was rife in ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
Marriage was a revolving door in ancient Egypt. Divorce in ancient Israel is hard. It happened, but it was much more difficult than it was in Egypt. In Egypt, all you had to do is declare yourself divorced, and you're divorced. That's it. Then it's just a division of property.
I guess that's something we have in our modern day, but
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. So we kind of carry on from the Egyptians in that one respect, I guess. Very, very easy divorce in some respects, I think, and property division.
Very difficult, yeah.
We are in the exile today after all, far out. Revelation confirmed. Oh man, that was a good answer. That was a very good answer. I hope that helps out. I hope that helps you out, Karis. Very helpful, especially when explaining, look, copying doesn't therefore mean something isn't divine. Just because, for example, God gets the Israelites to take some images of certain Egyptian gods, kind of tailor the aesthetics to cherubim and all that stuff, doesn't therefore mean it's not divine. Like,
well, even ritual bathing practices.
Sorry?
Even ritual bathing practices.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
For the priests. Very, very similar to Egyptian priestly purification rituals.
Yeah, there you go.
Basically, the only thing they don't do is shave their heads and wash their mouth out with natron. Yet the only thing the Israelite priests don't do.
That would be another very interesting one to cover, maybe in another stream, just all about different contextual issues, like the relation between that and baptism. Yeah. That would be
both
very
ritually bathe prior to going up to the temple.
Yeah.
Both wear new linens or new garments. Both wear animal hide shoes are forbidden. Yeah. Animal hides of animal products is forbidden when they go up into the temple.
Yeah. That and the significance of just the priest bathing versus all believers.
Yeah.
When I think that's the whole priesthood of believers and such, as Exodus says, and then Peter himself reflects on. Yeah. But yeah, great answer. Hope that helps you out, Karis. And time to get into some more drama. Why not? Did you ever see Dr. Bowen's argument that the OT once taught homosexuality was morally good? So bad.
I haven't seen it, but I can just imagine. Especially after hearing his historical analysis of the prophecy of Tyre. I mean, I just couldn't believe the reasoning behind that. It was just like, oh, really?
I watched that one years ago, and even I could see, like, bro, you like some of the text later says that there'll be other kings who continue it on and all that.
Yeah.
And even some people in the comments mentioned that, and he didn't really get back to them.
Well, he confuses that the whole 13-year conquest of Tyre is in the Bible, and it's not.
There you go.
This is one of those things. He probably got this from the pulpit. He probably got this from Sunday school, basically saying, oh, the Bible says that it took 13 years to conquer Tyre. It's from Josephus.
Yeah.
And Josephus gets it from a Phoenician source.
I might be able to comment on this specific question too, because not from Dr. Bowen, but he might be pulling from the same guy. I totally forget his name, but he wrote a New York Times article, and then he had like a proper academic article published, basically arguing, using the whole documentary hypothesis assumptions, that actually the original texts of Leviticus, where it says the man shall not lie with a man as with a woman. I think I remember the Hebrew off by heart because of a bit of a meme, but whatever. But basically arguing that actually the original text, because of some weird features that he arbitrarily picked out from the earlier sexual sins mentioned there, that actually the original text didn't forbid it, and it was just a later addition to the text.
That's bad. Like anytime you're trying to manipulate hypothetical documents, documents that didn't actually exist, you're going to run into problems.
Yeah, that's the folly of source criticism, I guess, or rather
Yeah, it is.
historical critical method.
Yeah.
It's just I can have these arbitrary principles. Like, this is what the author would have done. Yeah, this scribe from 1000 BC, and this author with a totally different cultural rivet to me, he would have done this. So the fact that he didn't must mean that someone else wrote this short.
Well, it is actually a faulty reasoning.
Yeah,
it's what the author would have done. Therefore, that's what the author did.
Yeah. And like the argument from silence, that's extremely hard to establish. I think you can in very limited circumstances, but not with the normalcy and the
would have isn't the same as did. It isn't.
Yeah, that's it.
There's a comedy, a political comedy called it's a British comedy called In the Thick of It. It's a political comedy. And in the very first episode, the minister comes back with a word from the prime minister saying, we should do this. And then he gets heat from the political whip. Basically said, wait, you just announced this program. What did the prime minister say? Well, he said, we should do this. That means, yes, we should do it. And the whip says, should have. Does that mean yes?
It kind of means the opposite, actually.
Yes, it does.
There you go. And to bring it back to my own discussions with Roman Catholics and also with Orthodox, they'll say the same thing. Specifically with John chapter 6 in arguments regarding the real presence in the Eucharist and that. They'll go to John chapter 6 and they'll talk about how Christ says, he says, this is my body, this is my blood. Whosoever eats the flesh and drinks the blood of the Son of Man, you'll have life in him. And then they'll say the fact that the regular Jews following him say, this guy wants us to eat his flesh. They understood they was talking literally. And because if Jesus wasn't talking literally, he would have corrected them. Therefore, real presence in the Eucharist or whatever, which, I mean, first immediate problem, they're thinking that he's talking about his actual flesh, not like a piece of bread that has the Aristotelian substance of his flesh. So if they want to take them literally, then they have to say that Jesus actually was saying, I will give you my physical, actual flesh to eat, which obviously they don't believe. But then also, of course, the would have. Jesus
would have is problematic.
He would have corrected them, or he would have worded it this way if he did, which I argue that he does do that when he says, my words are not flesh, but spirit and life. And of course,
but you have to show that they did.
That's the thing. And then, so I would say that they did, but even ignoring that, there are other instances in the Gospels where Christ says something confusing, people are confused, and it's not explained later. Perfect example, when he says to the disciples something specifically, like he basically foretells his death and his resurrection in 3 days. Yeah. And Matthew writes that the disciples were confused by this saying. They didn't know what he meant. Jesus never clarifies himself.
No.
He doesn't, and he doesn't have to. And if anything,
doesn't have to.
The fact that he does clarify himself it's really sensible. It really makes sense even on a non-real presence view in John chapter 6, because the whole point of that passage earlier on, something which I would say non-monogists would like to ignore, is the fact that he actually says no one can believe in me unless the Father gives it of him. Yeah. Unless no one can come to me unless the Father first draws him. So the fact that he's making something that's very confounding and very confusing, it's kind of cutting off it's kind of getting rid of the chaff from the wheat. He's saying something that to those with the fleshly ears would be very off-putting, but then to those who think in spirit, those who actually have the Holy Spirit, they won't be off-put by it. They'll at least be willing to hear Christ out in what he's saying, which makes sense on both a real presence or a non-real presence view. And I personally argue that John chapter 6 doesn't even address the Eucharist at all, which is going to be something in the future. But either way, so good answer to that question, I guess, as usual. Here's another good one. Favorite anime?
Mobile Suit Gundam.
Mobile Suit Gundam. There you go. I'll insert myself into it. I can't say I've seen as many as you. My favorite, I still don't know how to pronounce it, Code Geass or something like that.
Oh, Code Geass, yeah.
Code Geass, yeah. That one's my personal favorite up there. Very good. So, yeah. Record time. Record time of a question. The first time in less than a minute. Let's go. Do you have any thoughts on Dr. John Curry?
Yes, I do. He is sort of He's one of these Old Testament scholars that tried to add Egypt to his repertoire. Sometimes he's successful, sometimes he isn't. Okay. I think his theory that the plagues of Egypt were a specific punishment on specific gods in Egypt, I think is wrong. Just plain out wrong. I disagree with him vehemently on this. I think he reads too much in the biblical text for this. We only have one plague of Egypt that specifically talks about the gods of Egypt, and that's the 10th plague. The other 9 don't. The other 9 make no reference to the gods of Egypt. And really, even the 10th plague is not about a punishment on the gods of Egypt. It's a punishment on those who hold the power structure. Basically, the text is using God as far as anyone who has the power of life or death. Just like Moses, God says to Moses, I will make you as a god to Pharaoh. Moses is never a god, but he is somebody who holds the power of life and death over people. And it's using the term God in the same way when it talks about the 10th plague.
Okay. Good stuff. Very good stuff. Hope that answers. I hope that gives you a nice idea of Dr. Falk's opinion on this man. I guess we'll look at a couple of just nice comments here. My man Jack Ray, how are you? Good to see you here. Just tuned in. Now I have another cool channel to watch, that of Dr. Falk. Thanks.
Thank you.
Very good stuff. And Kara says, thank you for the answer, Dr. Falk. Very great stuff. Love
My
it.
pleasure.
Love seeing it's just so satisfying seeing people who like, thank you, your stuff really taught me or really helped me get through this or that or help me understand.
We have been just so thrilled that our work is helping people. Absolutely.
Yours is
when we started our channel, we thought, hey, okay, we're a real niche channel. I mean, Egypt and the Bible, what's the overlap here? How many people is this actually going to appeal to? So we thought we were going to be this 300-400 subscriber channel that 10 years down the road we might hit 1,000 someday. We did not expect it to resonate with people as much as it has.
Oh yeah,
that came as a complete shock.
Absolutely.
Complete shock.
I can say as someone who almost totally deconverted in 2017 on account of what these unbelieving, like I deliberately steal, man. I want to find like what the best the other side has to offer. And I did that quite intensely with respect to gospel historicity, kind of tore my beliefs to shreds. And just before I left the faith, I thought, okay, no, hang on. These certain unbelievers like to make themselves as the kind of the arbiters of critical thinking, But let's see what happens if I consistently apply the critical thinking to their claims and their theories. And it just went all back down. And I realized, hey, you know what? We actually have a pretty darn good case. Dare I say an even better case.
Yes.
And then I guess not nowhere near as intensely, but likewise with all the issues of the Exodus and Egypt and the Old Testament, the like. So very good stuff. I have to agree with Theodore here. Based. I don't know. You get the idiom? Please tell me you get the idiom of this. Based. Just what based means. Get it? No? You get it?
Yeah, I get it.
Very good. That's the new lingo of the day. It's something you'll hear me say a lot. A guy who's in a community I'm in or I haven't interacted with for a while though. He's personally quite fluent in like classical Greek, and he taught me that to say base in classical Greek, you say tethemeliormenon. literally a participle meaning having been established, having been set in place. So tethemeliormenon. That's what I like. That's what I'll probably be saying on my alternate channel once I can get conversant in the ancient tongue. We've got one more last minute one by Karis. Why are the oldest New Testament, I guess outside your field, but why are the oldest New Testament manuscripts found in Egypt as opposed to Jerusalem or Antioch, etc.?
Well, they're not. They are called Alexandrian texts, but that's the text type. That's where they were first discovered. Most of the Alexandrian texts are actually found in Antioch.
Oh, there you go. Karis might here be thinking of the Oxyrhynchus papyrus dump.
Even the Oxyrhynchus papyrus, the oldest ones are the oldest New Testament manuscript, and the fragments
They're like pellets.
Yeah, they're real tiny. We find the oldest complete manuscripts in Egypt, but we don't find the oldest fragments in Egypt.
Okay.
Like the oldest complete manuscripts, we have Codex Alexandrinus. We have the Sinaiticus. Both of those complete manuscripts are found
in Vaticanus and Sinaiticus are the oldest we have.
Yeah. So those are the oldest complete manuscripts, but the fragments way predate that, and we find those in Antioch.
Yeah, there you go. Cool. Kind of get some more clarity on that, even if it's outside. I love seeing how like you can give even very insightful comments of even things outside your field, which just goes to show that like scholars don't have to be restricted to one area.
Well, here's the thing. I didn't do this all my life. I mean, it might shock people to know that I only got my PhD in 2015. I had a whole set of careers and experiences that predate that. So I am bringing to this not just my experience in, say, Egyptology, but I did a lot of theological education prior. I also had a full career as a computer systems analyst. I was a jeweler at one point.
Oh, I remember that.
So, I have all this variety of experience that I can sort of channel into my studies.
Far out. That's awesome. There you go. And that's basically all the questions right now. Now, I won't go straight onto the surprise just yet. I'll go onto the thing we mentioned towards the beginning about that article on Winnie the Pooh and the documentary. I want to take a brief look at that because I remember I found it years ago when I was doing like reading into the documentary hypothesis, and I only just remembered it like very recently. Like, oh man, that thing of absolute gold. So I'm gonna share my screen here with the article. New directions in Pooh studies, and then some German, which I don't know. And at the beginning reads, there is little need at the present stage of scholarship to attempt a justification of the principle that the dogma of unitary authorship for works of literature must be totally abandoned. In all confidence, we may say that a priori, we may expect the Pooh corpus, Winnie the Pooh hereafter abbreviated W, containing traditions of higher antiquity than the Deutero-Pooh book, The House at Pooh Corner, hereafter abbreviated H, to be of composite origin, even if there were such a person as A.A. Milne, traditionally the author. We may be sure that he did not write the Pooh books. His name does not occur once within the narratives themselves, and we can hardly be expected to take a title page, manifestly a later edition, seriously. Sources of Pooh literature. Composite authorship is clearly indicated by a number of linguistic peculiarities and literary unevenness. We observe the oscillation between various names for Pooh, an unerring pointer to the diversity of authorship. He is called within the space of half a page, see W 3.31, Pooh, Pooh, Winnie the Pooh, Winnie the Pooh, Winnie the Pooh, and Bear. A plain indication of interweaving of a number of sources. Other names by which he is called in the P corpus include Edward Bear, Winnie the Bear, Pooh Bear, P Bear, Sir Pooh de Bear. There is also a tradition that he lived under the name of Sanders, which appears only once in our present text, since for some reason now forgotten, Sanders traditions have been rigorously expunged from the corpus. And so on and so it just goes on and on and on.
Wow.
It's a real, and the best thing is that in giving the kinds of arguments he does, he actually directly references like actual biblical scholarly works that make such arguments.
Yeah.
So like, for example, with the Sanders thing, possibly Sanders has been eliminated because he knew too much. CF, his erudite work on the tendencies of the synoptic tradition, Cambridge University.
It's a wonderful reductio ad absurdum argument. That's what he has done here. He's done a reductio ad absurdum argument here, using Winnie the Pooh.
And his citation for his thing about how the title page of the author A.A. Milne is a later edition and shouldn't be taken historically seriously. He cites, I follow here the view of S.R. Driver, an introduction to the literature of the Old Testament. Quote, the age and authorship of the books of the Old Testament can be determined, as far as this is possible, only upon the basis of internal evidence supplied by the books themselves. No external evidence worthy of credit exists.
Yeah.
Oh It's a true work of art. Maybe we can react to it one day. Maybe flipping Rob from Sentinel Apologetics will steal my idea and do that. I don't know. Personally, I'm kind of hoping I'll become your new favorite Australian at this point. But for one, I'm sorry, Rob, but for one, I actually have a proper accent. He's gonna. Hello, my name is Rob. I'm from Western Australia. I kind of have an Australian accent, but kind of not really. And he speaks it kind of soft like that. And I'm just like, I kind of question, hang on, is this guy from Australia? Is he, where is he from exactly? I don't know. And so, no shade. I love the guy. Awesome guy. I'd have a beer with him if we weren't on opposite sides of the country, but oh well.
Yeah, it's a big country too.
It's a continent. It's a flipping continent.
We have the same problem here in Canada.
Oh yeah, 100%. You snow Australia, basically.
Yeah.
Snow Australia. Only we're just better. But anyway, on that note, I just thought I'd show that one. But now we are reaching the surprise that I wanted to get to. And of course, I guess Dr. Falk's heart is now kind of palpitating because, oh gosh, what is this going to be? What's this rogue Australian going to reveal unto me? And what I am revealing for the new surprise that we will now be going through together, once it decides to process, taking a sweet time. It's just a slideshow. It shouldn't be that hard. But yeah, I guess while we're waiting for that, I assume you might go for a read of that good old what is it?
That classic of comparative literature.
It's the true secondary source. Yep. I probably will some point in the future if I ever do my own work on that. I'll probably unironically cite that paper. But now for the surprise itself. Meme review. That's right. We have a real Egyptologist here to review memes of the ancient Egyptian period, including some some of my own custom ones at the very end. So let's begin. Who would win? 2,000 years of ancient Egyptian religious traditions and as many deities and myths, or some guy who worships a disc?
Yeah, I think that contest is moot.
Tell us the context. What does this mean? What is it telling us about in the history?
Okay, it's telling us that Akhenaten, the guy on the right there, essentially abandoned all the Egyptian gods and religion to worship the sun disk, the Aten. Okay. So that's what it means. And basically, it's a meme saying that you can't fight the system.
There you go. And sorry to take us back really briefly to the new directions in poo studies. Mrs. Falk has just arrived here. I didn't see this, but there is an author, Eeyore. Oh, that is brilliant. And I've never heard of this before. Got to say, this made my night. My pleasure for making your night. It's honestly just remembering it just made my month. Oh man, but anyway, that's our first meme. Let's move. Ancient Egypt exists. Aliens. You want pyramids?
Ooh.
I put this in because I was teaching year 7 earlier this year, grade 7 class, doing a unit on ancient Egypt, and they were the best class ever. Normally the young kids, grade 7ers, just hitting that puberty. Normally they're the worst little demons that you could deal with. But these kids, they were in the higher tier of the classes at this school. They tiered students according in a grade according to 3 levels. Right. They were the higher tier history class, and they were well behaved, but they were super enthusiastic, like to the point they're just constantly asking questions as I'm giving the initial presentation. And I give them their class, their tasks. They're often just ordinary things like answer these questions, do a little research, watch this video, and they just dig right into it. That was super, super enthusiastic. And so it was just really, really, really wholesome to listen to and watch.
When I first got my PhD, I was actually asked by an elementary school to come in and to give a little presentation to grade 5ers on ancient Egypt. And I had a slideshow, and I came into the class, and they were making paper mache mummies, and they were eating this stuff up. And I gave him this little slideshow showing all sorts of different, tombs and mummies and all that, and pyramids. And at the end of it, going, oh, can he stay? Can he come back? Can he come back?
Oh man, it's just so rewarding to see. Like when.
Oh yeah, it's so rewarding. I love working with kids. It was just priceless, absolutely priceless.
Oh man! Oh, darn! So many comments I missed from the Winnie the Pooh thing.
It was actually even funny when the teacher goes, and of course I was newly minted PhD, so I'm wearing the doctor title proud, and the teacher goes, well, do you have any questions for Mr. Falk? And I corrected her. I said, Dr. Falk, and she goes, sorry. And I thought to myself, I just schooled a school teacher.
In front of their own class. Oh dear.
It was so funny.
Ladies and gentlemen, I didn't have to ask Dr. Falk to bring back the laugh. But that wasn't what I originally meant. That'll be coming up soon. Ooh. But a couple of other comments just from the to bring it back briefly to the Winnie the Pooh one. There was no real Christopher Robin. Winnie the Pooh documentary hypothesis, yes. The Ribbon Priestley class. in the article himself, he actually names the different redactors in names like according to Winnie the Pooh, but he actually makes them spell out JEDP. Oh man, that's right. There is the laugh right there. And I forgot to ask, what do you rate this first meme on the Archaeological heresy, the Artem heresy?
Well, it's mostly true. I mean, it is mostly true, so you know.
Perfect. There you go. How many? What kind of ratings? How many shekels out of 10 do you give it?
Oh, I would give it an 8.
An 8. Okay. And this one, how many shekels out of 10?
1.
Oh, come on. That's too mean. Okay, whatever. Architects in ancient Egypt, treated as gods, created masterpieces for millennia. Architects now I have to redraw the whole project because my client wanted to move the toilet 3 centimeters to the right. Now,
yeah, there's some truth to that.
My brother tells me stories of how, like, because he's in the carpentry stuff, and they're working on this really big business, or not business, like a really rich family's home. And they want to, like, I don't know, I think they kind of want to move some stairs just a little bit, but then, and of course they're rich, so they can pay for all that, but now that means the workers have to just tear everything down and then rebuild everything, and so it's a beautiful thing.
Well, architects in ancient Egypt had to redesign plans from time to time.
Oh, gee, that
like for example, the first pyramid of the step pyramid at Saqqara of King Zoser. You know, the architect, we know the name of the architect. His name was Imhotep. And he's later on revered as a god of medicine, healing, wisdom in ancient Egypt. But he had to revise the plans for that step pyramid.
Okay.
Because the first one, it was too small. He was told to make it bigger. So they over double the height of it at the whim of the king.
Workers. Oh, those workers. Yeah.
So he had to make new stairwells. He had to make new shafts. He had to change a lot of things to make that work.
Yeah. So there is. I remember you mentioning all this about how this Imhotep guy would get deified. So there's truth. So there's truth. Was he the only architect who would get deified, or?
Yeah, he was.
Okay. So factually speaking, not architects would be treated as gods, but an architect. So
an architect.
Facebook fact check. Thank you very much. But how would you rate this meme out of 10 shekels?
I'd give it a 3 or 4.
Far out, you're cruel. Wait, what's
I'm a tough grader. Grader.
Like, yes, factual accuracy. Okay, whatever. But
you don't want me as your prof if you're a student.
It's a good laugh out of you. It's a very good laugh.
You don't want me as a prof if you're a student. Yes, you will learn a lot, but I'm a tough grader.
Well, that's kind of why I want it. That's kind of what I want you now, because I want to learn. I can take the. I won't say abuse.
People in my classes do learn.
Oh, there you go. 100%.
They do learn. I mean, I'm
curiosity. Do you ever do online stuff? Online classes?
I don't, and the reason is just time constraints.
Fair enough. One day, whether online or if I come to Canada or if you come to Australia one day, who knows? But that would be awesome. Let's move on. My Game Boy, my TV remote, and the batteries. I never played the Game Boy myself. I think I might have done that once or twice, maybe with an Xbox controller, in the TV remote, or something. Okay, probably not the TV remote because you kind of need that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Do you know what this scene is? Can you explain anything about it, or?
Yeah, sure. It looks like a scene from the temple of Seti the First of Abydos. That's, I think, from at least what I can tell here. I believe it's Seti the First giving food offerings to, I believe it's Isis. It's Isis or Mut. But I bet you it's probably Isis. But I can't read the inscription well enough here to say for sure.
Fair enough. But you can, I do remember, you can read like Middle Egyptian and...
Oh, yeah, I can, if you give me the whole text, but I don't see the whole text there.
No, fair enough. Actually, you might have the opportunity to do that. Only those born in 3200 BC will understand. Can you read some of that? Or is it just gibberish?
Some of that, yes. I read Huthor, Hathor there, but it would take me time to sort of deconstruct the whole thing, to translate the whole thing.
Fair enough.
So... Yes, but it would just take time.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I think even before the stream, how we're talking about teaching languages, but in a comprehensible input form way, natural learning. Maybe one day, like the resources almost definitely don't exist, but maybe one day people will be teaching at least some forms of Egyptian in like a natural language form of capacity. And then that'd be
really nice if we could start doing that.
Yeah, and then people can just casually read this stuff just like they're reading the newspaper, you know? Mm-hmm. That's kind of the aim. That's really the kind of the aim of it. And they'll just make... Yeah. Because in my personal experience, just with how it's taught today, like it's a bit of a broken record. I've said it a billion times. How it's taught today, it's inefficient. You learn a lot of the grammar, but you don't really get the nature of the text, and it makes it much harder and all. But I personally think with how you often see in many biblical studies papers and books and all that, how they'll focus so heavily on the few words in a sentence and like, oh, look, it must mean that. They'll address context, but then they'll focus heavily on certain words and sentences when just having a natural reading of the whole text will tell you something else.
Just looking at a text like this, I can tell it's fragmentary. Okay. You're not given the beginning of any sentence here. So you're going to have to start off at the next, say, word, as it were, and then sort of read it across. So I can already tell just from looking at this that this text extends a lot longer than this. Mm-hmm. And so you can start to read like the top line, where it talks about the limbs are Hathor, her limbs are given to him, the lady of his heart, just on the top line right there. But getting more than that out of this is going to be difficult because there's just not enough there.
Yeah, that's it. And
then the line underneath it is going to have, say, is going to be a continuation from the previous line. You would have to, because you're reading into the faces of the characters, you read this from, say, right to left.
Yeah, and kind of such a true comment there. The fun with Middle Egyptians that there's no punctuation, and likewise for ancient manuscripts of Greek, Latin, and so on and so forth.
No punctuation, no vowels.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, there's exceptions. You can find some, like literally ancient authors who did pioneer punctuation. Trying to forget, I forgot his name.
No punctuation, no vowels, no spaces.
Yeah, that's it. Kind of a bit of a nightmare. But and going back to what I was mentioning with how, like, because of just how language is taught, like ancient languages are just taught as a mechanical thing to, like, a code to break. They'll often focus so hard in making their exegetical arguments focus so hard on these individual sentences and words and all that. And even if they address the context, they don't let just a natural reading of the whole thing just inform how they're interpreting the text. They'll strain a gnat in specific sentences and words in order to get a certain point out and just ignore what the rest of the thing says. I can name a billion examples, but they'll just take us.
There's lots of them out there. Yeah.
Now, with this next meme, I will be genuinely impressed if you understand it, because this is some niche Gen Z Zoomer stuff coming up right here. I showed it to my Year 9 class.
You're going to show my age here, aren't you?
I don't know. What's that? I mean, hey, you got some stuff. You understood bass and some other stuff. Like that's great. That's great. You're in it with the young folk. You just got to get a backwards snapback, and you're one of us. How you doing, fellow kids? But I'll be genuinely impressed if you get it. I think viewers will get it though. Teacher, today we will learn about Egypt. Girls, ew, that's so boring. Boys, Amogus.
All right, you lost me here.
Okay, I'll have to help do a whole story. But do you at least get this figure in the middle here? Medjed, I think that's his name.
Not really.
What's this? I know something the Egyptologist does not.
Well, this is looking like a very late drawing anyway.
I've got to appreciate this. I've just got to appreciate this moment. Anyway, so I looked it up. Apparently, it's like this really, really obscure, maybe late deity that's only found in like two depictions, both in papyri. And it's this.
Yeah, it looks like a late. It does look like a late Ptolemaic papyrus.
Yeah, that's it. And it's just depicted. It's just like this little ghost looking thing, whatever, called Medjed.
My interest in Egypt sort of ends with, say, the end of the Pharaonic period.
Okay, yeah. So the conquest of Cambyses.
Basically, I lose interest the later you get.
Yeah.
So I'm all into the New Kingdom. When I get to the third intermediate period, I'm still sort of tuned in, but I'm starting to lose interest at that point. Late period, it's like, Ptolemaic, you've lost me.
Yeah,
not interested at that point.
But the context
it's most
is that
interesting.
The context is that there's this popular game called Among Us.
Oh, okay. I know what Among Us is. Now I get it.
And the whole thing with the meme is that people just over time, just this really this really messed up form of elision ended up happening where people would just not say Among Us, they'd say Amogus.
Okay.
And it's just some stupidness from it.
Now I get it because the center thing looks like one of the characters from Among Us. Yeah. Now I get it.
Oh man, he's looking a bit sus. Hey, maybe there's some other figures in Egypt who are pretty sus. I don't know, those doing with their conspiracies and whatnot. Probably good old our boy Ramses II would probably be like, hey, that little Semite over there, he's looking a little bit sus talking with his people over there. I think we might have an imposter on Mugus. But anyway, oh man, that's good. Okay, now I'm getting into like the appeasement territory where like when someone tries to act so much for the generation that it just comes off as campy and all that crap. I think now we're going to move on to some memes, a couple of memes that I made that I think you should appreciate. Oh no, sorry. First this one. Manga, then anime, and then the Netflix adaptation.
Ooh.
You relate? I bet you relate. Being an anime fan, you can definitely
relate.
Yep.
Yeah, I can relate.
I've heard bad things about Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah, I've heard bad things about Cowboy Bebop too.
Yeah. I mean, amazing things about the anime. And
the anime's amazing. The anime's absolutely amazing.
Was there a manga? I think there was a manga.
Yeah, there's a manga too.
Yeah, there's a manga. For every anime, there's a manga. But
no, actually, there isn't.
Technically, yes.
There is. There are animes that either started off as an anime and had a manga adaptation later, or don't have a manga adaptation at all.
What is this plural animes you're talking about? I don't know if that's proper. That's Oh man, but yeah, that's true. Whose body is this at the bottom? I think I can guess, but can you tell us?
That looks like Seti the First.
Oh, there you go. My man ages.
Quite well. It could be Seti the First. It could be Ramses the Third. It's hard to tell.
Okay. Yep. Fair enough. Now I think after this is some of the memes I made. No, one more. King Tut on a ground having a seizure. Ancient Egyptians. He's speaking the language of the gods. Now, I looked up what was behind this, and apparently there's a theory that some of the injuries on King Tut imply that he had some epileptic fit and then died that way. I don't know. I don't know. Is there any credence?
I don't subscribe to any particular theory on the death of King Tut.
Yeah.
I think there's many possibilities.
Yeah.
I don't think there's good evidence for any one at the moment.
Yeah. And I guess like as long as when people submit a theory, hey, it's just a way of thinking of it. It might not be this case, but this is how I think. If they're like that, fair enough.
It's really hard. It's really hard to do a post-mortem on a mummy because the mummy has been so altered through the mummification process.
Yeah.
While it does preserve some features of the flesh, it's really, really difficult unless there's some obvious evidence. Like, for example, in the case of Ramses III, they found the cut where he had been assassinated, which was his throat was sliced.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating when you find those things in ancient history that just connect to reality. Like the was it Tutmosis the Third, or was it one of the Ramses where there's like you see the axe blow to the head?
That's second Enrei-Tao.
Enrei-Tao. Okay, got ya.
He was a king of Dynasty 17.
Okay.
Yeah, he had an axe blow to the head.
Yeah,
and an arrow wound.
Ooh, nice, Gary.
So
that's
he had
nice, Gary.
Yeah. So he had been knocked off his chariot with a arrow wound to the head.
Ooh.
And the Hyksos just finished him off with the axe.
Far out. Good shot, but still doesn't compare to when was it Jeroboam when that arrow just came and got in between his armor. Was it Jeroboam or was it Rehoboam?
Josiah.
Josiah got hit, or was it
Josiah got hit?
Oh, okay. In between his armor.
Josiah is going up against Necho II, who's passing through the land to go up and help his allies, the Assyrians, at the Battle of Carchemish.
Okay.
And Josiah's playing regional politics here. He's interfering. Now, Necho tells him to back off, that he doesn't want a war with Josiah, but Josiah's not going to listen.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, the Israelites end up losing that battle, do they?
They lose that battle, yeah. And then Necho, when he loses the battle up at Carchemish, he comes back down and he steals stuff. Wow. So he exacts his revenge and makes sure he doesn't walk away empty-handed.
No, kick in the guts. That's a kick in the guts. Oh, well. Okay, I'm absolutely certain. I checked the folder. This next meme is one of my custom ones. POV, you just endorsed an early date for the Exodus. This is a huge disappointment. It was one of your streams, and the first frame was that. And it was paused, and I was like, oh man, I have to make a meme out of this. Oh man. But I guess that kind of is your face when you hear it, especially a scholar.
I still get it. I still get it all the time. I still get people on my channel who come on and comment about Ron Wyatt and the chariot wheels at the bottom of the Gulf of Aqaba. I mean, I get some really, really crazy stuff on my channel. So yes, that I have to admit that is probably my face when I hear you just endorsed an early date for the Exodus.
So many applications.
It's so idiotic. It's so idiotic.
I mean, look, personally, I wouldn't say...
Especially at this point.
I mean, okay, yeah. Well, knowing you, of course, being the firebrand, I mean, I'm a leb, but I kind of keep it under wraps. But I personally don't say idiotic, but I guess once you get into the evidence, it really does reveal, like, okay, you are extremely wedded to, like, for example, a strictly chronological 480 years since the establishment of the temple. I think that's how it is. Well,
here's the thing. Even it's sort of an argument that doesn't even really matter in the big scope of things.
That's it. Yeah.
I mean, yes, okay. It doesn't. But the problem is, it's become a shibboleth test. It's become a test of orthodoxy.
Yeah.
And this is why they're so wedded to it, is because the idea is if you read the 480 of 1 Kings 6:1 literally, you'll read the rest of the Bible literally.
Yeah, that's it.
And the fact is, in order to do that,
definition of literal. What's even the definition of literal here?
Well, even to accomplish this, they have to take over a dozen texts non-literally to get there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a good stepping stone.
It doesn't apply to the rest of the text. That rule only applies to one verse.
This text in particular.
And then they've got the stamp of approval saying you're a literalistic reader now.
Yeah, I guess
it's really what it is. And this is why it's so crazy, is because it doesn't even follow its own rules. When you apply that you ask, okay, Well, if that's the case, what about the city of Ramses? Oh, well, that's just another name for Avaris. Oh, well, what about the conquest of Hatzor, where, Joshua burns down Hatzor? Oh, no, that wasn't really Joshua who did it. That was Deborah.
No. It's if anything,
it becomes a compounding of ad hoc reasoning.
Yeah, and with this specific one in particular, it really appears to me to be a really good stepping stone of getting people out of the idea that every number given is intended to be an exact chronological thing, and thus, as a wider thing, getting people out of the strict wooden reading of every passage of scripture, except for certain convenient ones, and that by doing so, you actually come to greater evidence for the historical veracity for these documents, because when you do that wooden reading, well, you kind of kneecap yourself, because all the evidence is in, as you would say, 13th century BC. All the evidence is over there, and there's so much of it, even just by normal historical standards. Like, even if you go by hyper-skepticism, okay, you can find ways to do just so stories around the evidence. But if you're just a sober historical character trying to reconcile historical data, you can say, hey, there's all this evidence here that's suggestive of this event mentioned in this text, and it makes perfect sense. And you kneecap yourself from that when you just wed yourself to a certain dating because a certain line must be interpreted a certain way. Unfortunately, like, I'll admit, I personally found it very, I would read a lot of ABR, for example, biblical research, and I would kind of buy into it. And I can still kind of sympathize with it, but I did otherwise fully then buy into the idea that, look, the idea that 480 years is 40 times 12. That's just some silly later reasoning. We should read it as a literal year and all that. And even now, I can kind of understand, okay, it sounds far-fetched, but as a numeral, there is something to it. The fact that you can multiply these two highly significant numbers together to get 480, you shouldn't just dismiss it.
But we have lots of counterexamples in the culture. But here's the other thing too, is, taking that view ends up giving you a sloppy hermeneutic.
Yeah.
It becomes we read everything literal except that text. Oh, and that text too. And that text also. Yeah. And that text also. And it sort of becomes a ad hoc method of hermeneutic where, really what you take literally is what you like to take literally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that becomes the standard of reading it, and it's not rigorous.
That's it.
Whereas if you're taking a historical grammatical way of reading the text, you're saying, okay, I've got this text. I want to read it according to a genre, because its genre and its historical context will guide our reading of the text.
100%.
And that gives you a more rigorous reading in the long run that's historically consistent. Rather than an ad hoc method that is historically inconsistent.
Yeah. Best way to put it. Very best way to put it. How many shekels do you rate this meme?
Oh, I'll give it an 8.
I like it. I think that's very respectable. And speaking of Paramses, the city of Paramses was built in the 13th century BC by Ramses II. ABR. Where is that written, though? In the name, Paramses.
All right, I'll give that one a 10.
Yes, that's the last. I love it. I thought of that one 2 days ago, I want to say, maybe, or maybe a little before. And I was like, oh man, that Ben Shapiro meme, that is the most brilliant one to put here. It's literally this exact situation right here.
Yeah, it is.
Pretty much, as you mentioned before briefly, that there was this city, very small city at that, but found in the 13th century, and it's named after the guy who found it, Paramses, House of Ramses. And
yeah. Well, I mean, it's even worse than that, because we find say, Egyptian texts where it's just called Ramses.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
The P is often dropped in Egyptian texts.
There you go.
So it's worse than that. And we have a virgin site there, pretty much prior to Ramses. It's located on an island, so it's an isolated site. And when we look at, say, even the what's it called now? sort of the historical context here of the texts, the Israelites are being attributed with having done a certain action there. We're being told in the biblical text that they built the storage cities at Ramses and Pithom.
Yep.
Okay, so the Israelites are being credited with having done a certain kind of labor for those cities. If those cities are somewhere else or didn't exist, neither did the labor.
There you go. Because I remember I heard this argument. I don't know if it was specifically a skeptic or just someone who had kind of like a question, but that the idea that, so the theory is that the Israelites lived in Avaris, and then Ramses was very close and proximate city, but still kind of distinct from Avaris. And then someone says, well, the biblical text says that the storage city itself was Paramses and doesn't mention Avaris. How would you respond to that, I guess? Okay,
Paramses was the imperial capital. It would have had storage cities. Now, when we talk about storage cities, what we're talking about here is storage silos.
Yeah, silos.
That's mud brick storage silos that would have been around certain temples.
Yeah.
So in the case of Paramses, it would have had temples to Ramses or temples to the gods.
Yeah.
And as the imperial capital, it had to have had that.
Yeah.
Because the king would have had to have made offerings daily.
How much of Paramses is preserved for us?
Right now, it's hard to say because there's actually still a city above it. There's a modern town there.
True that.
Now, we've done cesium magnetometry surveys of almost the entire site. Cesium and ground penetrating radar. So we know what's under the town. And the whole town's practically been mapped out, even though we've never had to dig a single clod of dirt there.
Okay.
I've been there. It's still a farming village.
All right, there you go.
It's still a farming village.
I do hear that actually the city of Avaris itself was actually a lot of storage there. Is that I've heard that. And
well, there's a lot of storage. There's a lot of storage at almost every city, everywhere.
Fair enough.
Anywhere you have a temple, you're going to have a storage silo.
Fair enough. Is it possible the author kind of had an all-encompassing idea, all of it was Paramses? Since they were so darn close, they might have, or
well, it's possible, but it's also hard to divorce the fact that the later toponym is being used here. You really can't get out of the fact that a name that is specific to the reign of Ramses II is being used here, and not just being used there.
I mean to apply that whole term Paramses both to the city, to Paramses,
and
to Avaris.
No, they wouldn't have done that. Okay. The fact is that even in Ramesside period letters, it's still called Avaris. Avaris is never renamed. Like, for example, into Dynasty 20, long after the Avaris is abandoned as an occupied city, the port's still functioning. And Ramesside documents are calling it the Port of Avaris.
Yeah. That's
even though that port there is, at that point, primarily serving Paramses.
Yeah. Was there such thing as like dedicated storage cities rather than just cities with storage, or is it really kind of?
Well, they revolve around temples.
Right. Yeah.
The granaries are in temples.
Fine. That makes sense. Yep.
Everything, all the administration of food happens through temples. Yeah. That's how the distribution of food happened in ancient Egypt.
Yeah. And then the idea, I assume the Hebrew text would use the Hebrew term ear when referring to city, I presume.
Yeah.
Ear can refer to anything from
from a hamlet to a massive cosmopolitan, capital.
Yeah, there you go. So very interesting stuff. Lots of area for study.
Yeah.
We will now go to my final, what I'll call my masterpiece for the night.
Wasn't, huh?
Oh, look, there was a masterpiece, but the real magnum opus is this bad boy. When I said to one of our guys at the beginning, I won't have to ask you to laugh for us, because we have one final epic meme. Now, tell me if you can't hear it. I'm going to play it. Tell me if you can't hear it.
We're all brothers and sisters in pines now. Shut up back there. What's wrong with him, huh? Watch your tongue. You're speaking to Ulfric Stormcloak, the true High King. Ulfric.
I'm sorry. Well, when I play Skyrim, I always knock off Ulfric. I can't stand Ulfric.
Oh man, yes. Please give us your opinion on the conflict. Is Ulfric the true High King, or is he an imposter?
Oh, he's definitely an imposter. Bump him off.
And I have to say,
He's such a pompous idiot.
I have to say, I agree. I'm all for the Imperials, but slightly.
Well, you know what? The Imperials have their downside too.
They do. But look,
they are religious bigots.
If we want to have a chance against the Old Merry Dominion, and it's because of them that they have to be bigots, because of those darned elves.
Those darn elves.
Beauty, if we want to
I love knocking them off too.
That's it. That's it. Every chance I get, whenever I see in that game, whenever I see a patrol of these high elven soldiers and their
knock them off.
I'm just like, I'm not tolerating your existence on this mortal plane. I just go, I just do laps around them on my horse and just every single time. And so with that, I presume I can almost get your answer. Is Talos a genuine divine?
No.
Bruh. He's not one of the divines. You actually, whoa.
Nope.
So you don't believe that in the metaphysics of the Elder Scrolls, a man can reach divinity like Talos, or that he just didn't?
I just don't think he did. I leave the question of the metaphysics open, but I don't think he did.
So he was just the imagination of the original Nords reaching the lands of Tamriel, and they just wanted to mythology. Oh man, you know, maybe one day we can do another thing. We get your opinion on Tamriel politics in the Fourth Era. But
yeah, maybe.
It sounds like you do play some Skyrim, and
I play a lot of Skyrim.
We have a lot to talk.
I play a lot of Skyrim. I even mod it.
Oh no way! What are your main mods?
Ooh, I love the samurai sword mod. There's a beautiful samurai sword mod that looks like real samurai swords.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
I happen to really love samurai swords. There was a time I really sort of was interested in samurai swords. So for me, I can tell between a real one and a fake one.
Ooh.
So I've handled. I used to go to the Japanese sword shows in Chicago.
Far out.
And I was able to handle them.
That's some weeaboo
beautiful
right
stuff.
There.
Beautiful stuff.
Would you?
But there's a mod. There's a mod in Skyrim that looks really well. Also has very, very high damage too.
Of course.
Beautifully high damage.
Would you classify yourself as a weeaboo? Because I would classify you as a weeaboo.
No, I do not classify myself as a weeaboo. No.
Oh man.
I love Japanese media. I love Japanese culture, and it's just not restricted to anime. I love Japanese ceramics. The ceramics you see behind me are Japanese.
I don't know.
Under the name label there.
Okay. Oh yeah, I can kind of see the top. Yeah. Got you. Okay, so Skyrim. Any other game choices you quite like?
Fallout.
Oh, man after my own heart. And definitely my brother's an absolute Fallout addict. Especially New Vegas. That's the main one he plays.
Oh, I love New Vegas. New Vegas is just sweet.
New Vegas is pretty nice. I haven't played much of that. I played a lot of Fallout 4, which I personally quite like it for the.
Did you play them? There's a mod that recently came out for Vegas, New Vegas, the big one in Oregon.
I
Can't remember
think
the
I
name
know
of
what
it.
you just saw. It's the one with like the new campaigns and that.
Yeah.
I haven't played that.
Oh,
I haven't really
that
played
one is
modded.
sweet. That one
Right.
is sweet. But for me, I mean, when I was in undergrad, even though I was a philosophy major, I hung out in the physics society. And I had this interest in nuclear power, nuclear energy.
So Fallout was just made for you.
So Fallout was just made for me.
And getting like a fusion reactor, putting it into that power armor, and then
Oh, absolutely.
destroying absolutely everything.
You have to trip out that power armor with mods too.
I haven't played much. I haven't played much Fallout, at least recently. But with Skyrim, I do have a bunch of mods. And my mod philosophy, I normally don't like mods in my games. The only mods I'll get is ones that they don't add something new to it, but they kind of flesh out what's kind of already with the game. So
yeah,
my favorite mods, ironically, one of my favorite mods are the tax mods that add taxes to the game.
Oh,
so
yeah.
That just at regular intervals, you have to pay your taxes. Otherwise, you'll get a bounty on you, and they'll send bounty hunters. And actually, like your money just doesn't sit there. You actually use it. And then extra.
Well, I mean, on Skyrim, I'll add like the I needs mods.
I use that. I use I needs. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
Where it creates for you the need to eat, drink, and sleep.
Yeah,
and get sick.
Yeah, that's it. And it makes fast travel kind of dangerous.
Yeah,
you fast travel far, and then you're suddenly hungry, tired, thirsty.
Yeah,
straight up. There needs to be an automatic ability where it'll just automatically consume that on fast travel. But oh well. But I personally like to avoid fast travel myself to kind of make it immersive. Like if I have to go somewhere, I'll just go to it. That's it. I
will sometimes use fast travel. Sometimes I won't. It'll depend.
Yeah.
It depends if I just want to get someplace quickly or if I want to wander.
If I'm seriously not bothered with the immersion, I'll just fast travel to a
especially when I got a load of goods I got to sell.
Oh yeah, 100% with that one, 100%. But yeah, I think that's actually okay. Really quickly, there needs to be. You will probably agree there are no good turn-based like Total War style games are based in the Bronze Age.
Correct.
That needs to happen. There needs to be even just a simple Total War.
I tried to play Assassin's Creed Origins.
Oh yeah,
but I couldn't. It seemed too much like work.
Yeah, the weapon system. I actually really like that.
No. As an Egyptologist.
Oh dear.
It seems too much like work.
Oh, dude, but I thought you would love that work.
Well, when I do play a game, I do want to have it to be an escapist experience.
I guess so, yeah.
So as an Egyptologist, I start doing Assassin's Creed Origins, and it's like, there's an inscription. I got to go read it.
How about Odyssey? That's more out of your field, I guess.
I haven't played Odyssey.
Oh, okay, got you. That one's really cool. Although you got to admit with Origins, like how would you rate their reconstruction of the area at the Ptolemaic period?
Not bad. It's not bad.
I personally loved just walking into the library.
At least the parts I've seen.
Okay, yeah. No, it's mad, especially with the fully reconstructed period with like the smooth slope, and that's something beautiful to look at. And the
scenery does very much look like Egypt.
Yeah.
It does really look like Egypt.
And just walking into the Library of Alexandria, that's just the wonder of that. Just walking into there.
I never got that far.
Fair enough.
I never got that far because it just was too much like work. It was just too much of a struggle.
Yeah, fair enough. Maybe I'll make that Bronze Age RTS one day.
It even spoiled my fun with Tomb Raider.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Archaeology now.
I don't know if you do.
Although I never had to deal with a whole lot of animals when I did my digs. I've never seen a snake in Egypt. I've never seen a scorpion.
Oh, far out. There you go.
I have encountered wild dogs.
Oh, well, that's fine.
They're not fun.
Yeah. I don't know if you played much Minecraft.
I don't play Minecraft.
Oh, that's unfortunate. It's only the greatest video game of all time ever created, but yeah, no pressure. But...
Unfortunately, I've had to restrict my game playing as I got more and more busy.
Oh, I bet.
I mean, I got like in a half hour of Skyrim today, but that's about all I got. Well, YouTube is so time consuming.
Oh yeah, I'm starting to feel that now. I'm personally starting to feel that now because I'm even editing another friend's video for him, and I want to make that potentially another income stream. So, and even that can be a bit of a even my most recent major video, my first of my like mini history videos on the like a mini kind of doco, if you will, but educational on the quarter decimal controversy, and it's not a very long video, but even with the simple editing I did, it takes a lot of work. It does really take a bit of work just to move things around. Can take a fair little bit of time.
If you have to do compositing, it can take forever.
Oh yeah, 100%. I just can't wait till I get my portable green screen in the relatively mid-tier future, and that's gonna add some real fun to it. I wanna kind of do like where I turn my camera so that I have like maybe some kind of board, but it's like the green screen, and then I treat it like it's a whiteboard, but it's actually just a green screen, and everything just moves and animates and funny fancy stuff and all that. So that'll be fun. But anyway, I think that's about it for today. This is a excellent interview, excellent wisdom, lots of learning, lots of education. God willing, plenty of stuff that anyone watching now, in the future, and in particular students, whether from school all the way up to the uni, and maybe even scholars themselves can learn some stuff on how to do history, how to interpret the evidence, some fallacious moves to avoid, and it was just absolutely, and as well as some proper game choices as well for what you should be doing in your spare time. But that was really awesome, Doctor. I have to thank you a ton. This is an excellent opportunity, and I think it was fantastic with all the wisdom and knowledge you just poured onto the stream for other people to just lap up at some point. I think it was fantastic. Thank you heaps for coming on here.
Well, thank you for having me on today.
It was great. Am I your new favorite Australian yet?
Oh yeah, obviously.
I wish Rob was in the chat right now. Oh boy, he's gonna see this one day. He will see this one day.
And then tomorrow, Rob will be mine.
One day we'll get a definitive answer. I don't know. Maybe me and Rob will get in a cage match one day. We'll see who's Dr. Falk's favorite. Oh man, but because your last plug was so long ago, do you want to plug anything of yours again? I guess towards this very end part of the stream.
Subscribe to Ancient Egypt and the Bible, my YouTube channel.
I will link to that right now, actually. Yes.
We value all our subscribers. We value the questions. We value the people who support us.
100%. His channel right here, people. In the live chat, go follow that link. Go subscribe to Dr. Falk. Absolutely fantastic stuff. I do intend at some point when I'm finally back in teaching, when classes come back, when I get all that jazz, I intend to use at least some of your videos, at least as a like further watching thing. So I don't like to just use videos in the class for teaching. I think unless you're in an emergency and you don't have anything left, I think it's a bit of a cop out. You're a teacher.
It is, it is.
So then when I'm in teaching and I'm like the kids, hey, if you want to learn more about this topic, here's this awesome channel. Here's some awesome videos by it. So I'm definitely going to be doing that if I get to teaching ancient Egypt one day, and even just this interview right here, when I get into like a unit on how to do history, historical method, and I'll just send my students this video after the fact. But yeah, fantastic stuff. And of course, Dr. Falk's book right here. I'll plug it again. The Ark of the Covenant in its Egyptian context. Absolutely fantastic picture book. If you're illiterate, okay, you will have some trouble still, but the pictures are really, really good. They're awesome. And Doctor, thank you so much for coming, and
thank you
everyone for watching this stream. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope everyone who's watching after the fact has enjoyed it. This is the other Paul. This is Dr. David Falk. You have a blessed morning, blessed afternoon, blessed evening.